Hey everyone, it's good to be back. I've not made any videos for a while, so I'm excited to start making some videos on Toddle, which is my favorite no-code app builder. It really is the special one in the no-code space, I feel. So hopefully this will give you some inspiration to at least check it out or look into it deeper. Okay, so if you're watching this video, then I assume that you already know how to set up a Toddle account and how to create a project. So I'm in here on this app and I've got a branch that it automatically creates for you. This is one that I've created separately, but you should get one that's got the either called start or dev. And then all we've got to do then is edit. If you just created the project, it will take you straight in. You don't need to set the branch up. Okay, branching is a subject, not for this video, let's put it that way. So I've created a blank page here. So if you created a blank application, blank page, and you get a few little elements in the middle, just delete those from this tree simply by highlighting them in the tree and pressing delete. Okay. The only one it won't let you delete is this top level one, which is the one that Toddle puts on there and is the main container. Okay. So here we are. We've got a blank screen, a blank page. I want to develop our app. Where do we even begin? So if you've got some app ideas and you don't know how to lay things out and you want some little bit of inspiration, I'd really recommend going online and just searching for web UI app layout. I always find that the best ideas are from Dribbble. So obviously there are other places, but just try that out. And you can see you get lots of app ideas here. Now, I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that you just take something and rip it off wholesale, okay? It's just there for inspiration. So what I would suggest is just look through, and there were lots and lots on Dribbble. These are just a few examples here. And just take a look and see if there's any that take your fancy or whatever. And yeah, if we look down, we can see various different examples of different layouts. So you pick the one that you feel is closest to what you imagine. Most of us are not designers, let's be honest. So if we can take some inspiration from a really good designer, then that can only help us build a really good application, a really good looking application, because design is important. It's the first thing that a user sees. So no matter what else is going in your app, the design is really important. So that's up to you. Again, do not just rip somebody off wholesale. Just take inspiration from different designs and apply it to how you want. I've got a couple of ones that I've picked out, which is this one, again from Dribbble. And yeah, that's kind of like a light mode. And there's got another one here that's very similar, not exactly the same, but it's similar, but it's kind of in a dark mode so that we could look to apply light and dark mode in our application. So yeah, there are differences between the two, but I'm going to look to implement this for now and we'll see how we go. Now I am going to rip this off wholesale just purely as an example to show you that when you see something that looks really good, that you can do it in Toddle. It's not a matter of, oh, only a designer can do this. You might need a designer to give you the inspiration, but once a design is there, it's fairly easy to replicate something like this. There's nothing too clever going on here by any means. Okay. So how do we get started with this? Well, let's have a look at the design here. On the left-hand side, we've got a navigator bar, and then we've got a header at the top and the different contents that we could have. And obviously, by the looks of it, whenever we click on one of these options, this will change. This header up here is relying on which option's been picked. Okay, but let's go a little bit more high level than that. Essentially, all we've got at the top level of this layout is two separate rows, effectively, or columns, depending which way you want to call it. We've got the navigator and we've got everything else. So really all that we need is to have two containers side by side, one on the left and then one on the right. And the one on the left can be a fixed width. So that may only be, say, 280, and we want the rest of it to be as wide as the screen is, really, so that we can fit as much content in there as we possibly can. Obviously being responsive down to a certain point. So let's get started on this one. So because these are the left and then the right, that means that whichever is going to contain this, i.e. the page, is going to have to be what we call a row container. And again, we're using Flexbox to do this. So let's look at that in Toddle. So Toddle gives us this div, which is, again, just think of a div as a container, okay? And just like we looked at there in Toddle, all the design is done using rows and columns. So we've got a column and a column, so that means that we need a row container. Okay, sounds a little bit counterintuitive, but we'll go through it. So here's our top level div. So like I say, we need that to be a row container because we need something on the left and then something on the right. Okay, so all that we need to do with that one is, with this div selected, it's the only one we've got anyway. So on the right hand side then, all we need to do is to change it from this arrow that points down, says a column container, and then change it to this one that says row layout. Okay, so click that. Nothing seems to change at the minute. Now, at the minute, the div is just stretching from left to right. What we want it to do is to stretch the whole height of the page as well. So the way we get it to do that is by going over here, clicking these little three dots, and when we get this flex, we can simply just say 1. Okay, and all that we're doing there is to say fill up the remaining space. In other words, flex to whatever space is available. Now there's nothing on there at this level, so it's just going to fill the entire space, the entire height of the page. Okay. So we can now start adding our divs, our left hand for the navigator and the right hand for everything else. So the way that we add an element in Toddle, we can click the plus button, or we can press E and we can select div. As you get into Toddle, you can get really quick at this. You can just do E and then start typing DI and then press enter, and we just get used to it in that way. Okay, so that's going to be our navigator, and then we're going to add another one. Again, E and then div. Okay, so we want this one to be our navigator, so we're going to have that as a fixed width. Okay, we don't want it flexing. It can just be a fixed width of, let's say, 280. It's fairly standard size for a navigator. Obviously, we can have a collapse option so that, for example, here they've got like this little button here that obviously is intended to collapse it. So we can look to implement that. But for now, let's just stick it as a fixed width. So we'll select this one. We can see it's filling the whole space top to bottom because it's inside this div and this is a row container. So in this one, what we're going to do is we're simply going to set a fixed width of 280 pixels, and we can see what that does. So that's done there. So with this one, now we want, if you look, if we just highlight this, we can see it's just giving, well, if we don't hover over it, we can see it's just a straight line, just like the other one was. Now we need to give it a width. So we don't want to give it a set width because we really want this to just spread across the rest of the available space. So again, just like we did with this one, when we wanted it to go top to bottom, which was a row container, this is a column container. We want this to go left to right to fill that whole space. So what we do the same thing again. We go over here to size, click the three dots, and just press 1 in flex. And there we go. We get our full length. And then if I roll this out a bit further, we can see that that's spread out to fill that whole space. Okay, so fairly straightforward. So if we now look at the design, so let's park this for a minute with the navigator. Let's have a look at the rest of it. So what we've got here is we've got a header, and then we've got a container that's going to contain everything else. Okay, so we've kind of got two more divs that we need to add. Now these are stacked one on top of the other. Okay, so the div that contains this then needs to be a column container, because a column means that everything that's inside that container is stacked top to bottom. So if we go over here and have a look at that, so that's the div, this is the main one. So I'm going to do the same thing again, E, and I'm going to search for div, and yeah, and then I'm going to add the next one as well while I'm here, and that's what we've got. So this one is going to be our header, and this one is going to be our main container. So this is going to be a fixed height. So because we've placed it in there and it's just filling the full width of its container at the minute, but not the height. So what we need to do then is just set this as a fixed height, and we'll set it to say 60 for now. We can change it if we want. So over here we'll just put 60. Okay, and then this one here, which is going to represent all of this, is we need to then just tell it to stretch the full width. And just like we've done in the other examples, we can just set that to be flex. So we're just going to go to size, and then we're going to say 1. And then we can see what's happening there. We then got that going on. Okay, so what you could say there is, well, how do I know which of these is which, these divs? Obviously, we're not too far into it, but as we get really into it, how do we identify them? So one thing you definitely shouldn't do, but Toddle does let you do, is to click on a div, not that one, because that's the one that Toddle gives us by default, but one we added, let's say this one. One of the things we can do is to go to attributes, and we can actually, if we want to, we can actually type something in. So I can say, this is our nav container in there, and this will actually show up over here to show you it. Now that seems like it's a really nice thing to do so that we can see what each one is. The trouble is Toddle is using HTML, semantic HTML, and it's just best if you just leave it for HTML to do what it's meant to do. Okay, now a div is just a container. It doesn't really mean anything. You can change the name of it, but there are other elements that will have functions, and changing the name will cause issues. So I generally don't tend to do that. So let's just change that back to what it was meant to be, which is a div. And what I'll do instead, I'm going to add, let's go to our top one. I'm going to add an attribute. So again, the way to do that is to click on the element over on the right, go to the attribute tab, and then we can click attribute. Now I've already named this one. So what I'll do, I'll delete this and show you what you need to do. Okay, so we just click plus next to the attributes, we type in ID, and then we can give it a name. So I'm going to call this one page container as it was before. Okay, an ID is the common attribute for a HTML identifier, which the browser will identify as the unique ID of that particular element on the page. Okay, so that's that one. So I know that. And this one, again, click plus next to attribute, is going to be an ID. And this one is the nav container. Okay. And then this one is going to be it's kind of like our main container, isn't it? On the page. So we've got a page container, nav container. Let's call this our main container. So again, ID and then main container. Okay. And then this one is like a header container. So we'll do that. Okay. And then this one is going to be like our main content. So what I'm going to do with that one, I'm going to give it the ID of content container. Now, okay, they don't show up on the tree, but what I tend to do is to sort of use shortcuts. Now, shortcuts are really important. Keyboard shortcuts are really important in Toddle because they just make life easier. They make things quicker. So because we've got 3 tabs along the top, what Toddle has done is to use the first 3 letters next to the shift key of A, S, and D for you to switch between the two. Now, it seems slightly counterintuitive that A is for styling, D is for attributes. Sorry, S is for attributes, and D is for styling. But the way they've done it is it's left to right. Okay, so essentially, then, if you need to see what the IDs of your element tree is, then you can simply just press S, and you can see this, and then we scroll down, and you can have a look and see what each one is. So it's still useful to name them using the ID attribute, but whatever you do, don't change the tag. So again, let's move on and we'll take a look at what we've got here in our header. So on our left-hand side, we've got kind of a title which aligns with whatever option they select on the navigator. And then on the right-hand side, we've got a series of options, a search option, a couple of notifications, user information. So what I'll tend to do is look at this and say, this is where the title is on the left-hand panel, left-hand container. and then everything else is on the right hand container. So obviously we don't know because it's not stretched out too far, but it looks like in this screenshot as though if you were to stretch this page out to the right, that all of this from the search engine onwards, from the search box onwards, would effectively move over to the right, and the thing that was on the left would stay on the left. So what we need to do then is to have a row container, because they're going to be we're going to need a container for this and then a container for everything else on the right to be side by side. And then when we're dealing with the right hand container that's got this and this and this and this, then we'll need a row container as well. So again, it's just a case of looking at things and deciding what type of containers that you're going to need. Are they going to be row? Is it going to be column? Okay, so we need two columns which are going to be side by side, so we need a row container for that. So our header container, which is this, needs to be a row container. So again, we'll go to styling and we'll go to row. Okay, and so again, we need two containers inside of this, left and right. So press E and then div. Okay, and then the other way that you can do things, if you're just copying things, then what you can do is you can press the Alt, hold down the Alt key or the Option key, and just drag it down, and it will actually make a copy of that div that you're using there. So this one is going to be the left-hand container. So again, I'm just going to name things. You don't have to do this. It's entirely up to you. Okay, I'm going to start to abbreviate things. Left header container. Okay, and then right header container. Okay. Okay, so what I want to do then is I want to make sure that the one on the left actually positions to the left, which it will do naturally, but the one on the right goes over to the right, so that we get this effect here. Okay, so the way that I do that is in the container itself that these two belong to, into styling, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to space these. So the way I do that is I simply double click on this. Okay, so we can't see anything really, so I'm just going to sort of create some spaces. So I'm just going to say this one is going to be 100% height, and I'm going to set it to be 150 width, just so that we can see it on the page. Okay. So another trick that you can try with this one, especially when you're just doing like the just laying things out, what they call wireframing, is maybe give it each one a background so that you can see it better. Okay. So I'm going to give this one here. I'm just going to scroll down, and in the background, I'm just going to use some of Toddle's predefined colors. So I'll give that one of a red 300, and what I'll do the same with this one. Is I'll give it a height of 100%, so it's a full height of its container, and I'll just give that a width of 300 for now. Okay, we're going to change that, but let's just leave it for now. At least we can see what's going on. Okay, so the point I wanted to make is that by having these spaced out like this, which we did by double clicking on there, again, I'll just show you, double click to put it back and double click to space it out. Alternatively, you can just type auto it into the gap spacing box, but it's just easy just to double click it. And so what's happening there is that it is doing what we call space between. So it's effectively, if we had a third box, we would space equally between the two. So it's just sending one to the left, one to the right, which is exactly what we want in there at the minute. Okay, so if we look at this one, then we just want some text in there. Okay, so we're not going to go too deep into the text just for now, because we need to look at some of the styling, but we'll just do something just to get us started in here. So I'm going to put a text element in here. Now I want it to be centered in terms of, I want it to be centered vertically anyway. So in this div, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on that, okay, and that will mean anything I add in there will then be displayed in the middle, okay. So I'm now going to add a new div inside of this one. Remember, is the left container. Just press S if we're unsure, and we can see it on in our little ID. Go back to A to go back to styling, okay, and then I'm going to add an element into this. So I'm going to press E, and I'm going to put a span in there. because you can add a text directly in, but I prefer to put the text into a container. So I'm going to add a span, and we can see that Toddle has added a little text. We can see it's centered in the middle purely because we did this over here. Okay, so there's no space really between there and the navigator. So what I would rather do there is to rather than have add some padding to give us some space between the navigator and the header, rather than do it here, and even rather do it on the header, I'd rather do it on the container, because remember, if we close this up, all we've really got at the top level is the nav and the main container. Okay, so in the main container, I'm going to go over here. I'm going to add a little bit of panning. I'm just going to say 16 pixels for now. Again, we'll do things a little bit differently, and it just moves it across, just gives that little bit of space to the left and the right. If I only wanted to add it to the left, then what I could do is just click here, okay, and leave the 16 on the left and get rid of that on the right, okay, but I don't. I want to add in both, so I'll just add that back in, okay. So with the span here, what I want to do then is I want to then make that a little bit bigger, so it looks a little bit more like that one up there. So if I go onto the text, all I can do on the text is just change the text effectively, because it's just like HTML. The actual text, there's no such thing really as a text tag. Okay, text just lives within a container, in this case a span. So I can style it on the span if I wanted to. So we've got all of these options here, and it's important to understand what inherit means, because inherit can save you an awful lot of time. So essentially, all inherit enables you to cascade all of the settings down from the top. So for example, if I set the top level div to a font, if I don't override it in its children, then what's going to happen is it will use that font all the way through. So let me pick a font. Okay, I'm going to select Inter, which seems to be the one of choice these days. And then everything else will inherit from there. If say change it on here and change it to something else like that one, provided that everything else, I don't think there's a big enough difference, is there, between that and that one. Nonita or Poppins, for example. Let me just change that to inherit. Right, there we go. Okay, so again, these divs were not set to inherit, which is what's happened. So essentially then is, if I've set that explicitly on there. Now, if I get rid of that and just say for that one to inherit, then it's just going to go back to the top level one. So it's just important to keep in mind that what we can do is to keep things at as high a level as possible and only override them in the tree when we absolutely need to. Okay, and so we can set a color, for example, at the top, and that will cascade all the way through. And that can be really useful for when we're doing things like dark and light theme. Okay, so we're not setting colors everywhere. So, okay, so we've got an inherit on our font. So we've got an inherit on size, but let's say we want that a bit bigger. So I'm going to click on this. Now this gives us access to style variables. So in other words, it's variables that are predefined, and we'll get into that later on. But if we click on this, we can then say, well, actually, I want font size to be XL, okay, and maybe bigger than that, actually. Let's say 2XL, okay, and then we're sort of starting to look a little bit at that size. Maybe not. We don't really want it perfect. We just want to give ourselves a clue about what's going on. And I'll change this to be analytics, just to make it look like we're doing something there. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of the background color on that one. Okay, so the way I do that is I just click this and I just click clear. If I want to put my own hex code in other words, my own unique color, then I can just click not on the variable, just in here, and then get the color pick out, and I can put my own hex code in there as well. Okay, color variable is important. We'll go through those very shortly. So we can't really see that in a minute. Okay, but let's just see if we can see if we preview it. Okay, so there's two ways to test this app in Toddle. You've got a little play button here. So if I play that, there's not a massive difference between that and what you see in the editor, okay? But it just enables you to do a quick test in the editor. But the best way to do it is to preview it, and then it will open its own tab, and then we kind of get this at the top. So that gives us a little bit more of an idea about what's going on. So back in here then, what we can do, sorry, picked the wrong one. So back in our editor, what we can do then is to look at doing the things that are on the right hand side. So again, if we go back here, we've got like a search box, we've got a couple of icons, and then we've got the user. So let's go from right to left in this case. So we've got the user. So obviously this is dynamic ultimately, but we don't need it to be right now. So if you look at this, we've got a container that's got an avatar, user avatar, and then we've got the username and then their role. So if you look at that whole process is kind of, it's a row container because we've got something on the left and something on the right. And then on this container, we then need a column container because this is going to be stacked one above the other. And this is effectively how you construct your page, by going right down into the detail about what's a column container and what's a row container. Now, I will say, Flexbox is not the easiest thing to work with. Okay, it's one of those things where you can learn it pretty quickly, but it can take years to master. Okay, I don't claim to be an expert at Flexbox by any stretch of the imagination. It's one of those things where just when you think you've got it all worked out, it will find a way to trip you up. But as long as you stick to the core principles of column and row and building up your structure, your page structure like that, then you shouldn't go too far wrong. So let's have a look at this. Let's just spread this out a little bit more because we'll probably need more width than that. So we'll stretch out to 500. Okay, so this one, because it's going to be a row container, because we're going to need these side by side, we need to make sure that we do that. So again, we're going to come in and do a row container, and then we're going to do our container that's going to be on the edge there. That's going to contain our user information. So what I'm going to do there is I'm going to change that to be on the right. I'm going to center it on the right, and that way the content that I add in there is going to be centered and it's going to start from the right hand side. Okay, so I'm then going to add a div with an E and a div. Okay, and then I'm going to need two more in there because to represent this, the avatar, I'm naming the role. Okay, and then they're going to be a row as well, so it needs to be a row container. So let's change that. It's going to be a row. Okay, and then I'm going to need two more in there, so I'm going to do a div, E for div. Okay, and then again, I'm just going to do option and just drag that down, and then I can make a copy of it. And this one is going to be a column container, which it is by default. Okay, so which is then going to contain our two labels of our username and our user role. Okay, so let's just name these because this is starting to get a little bit big. So ID, this is going to be the overall div is going to be our user info container. This one is going to be our user avatar. We can both contain if we like, and this one is going to be ID is going to be user info container. Again, it's up to you. This is just how I prefer to do it. It stops me getting confused when the layouts start getting pretty in depth. So in here then, we're just going to put the avatar. So how are we going to do the user's picture? So obviously, usually we're going to grab the user's picture from there, from the database or whatever, but obviously we don't have that option in this one while we're just building. So I'm just going to create a circular container, which is fairly straightforward. So I'm just going to take this div and I'm going to give it a static height and width of let's say 32 by 32. Okay, and we can then make it circular simply by coming down to radius And as long as it's more than 50% of the width and the height, in this case that's 16, as long as it's 16 or above, it's fine. Most people tend to just go 99 just to make sure that's what happens. Let's put a little bit of an outline so we can see it in there, okay? And we can see what's going on there as well, okay? And we'll just put a little bit of padding actually on the side of this. Well, we don't need to because we've put it on there. The only reason we can see that is because it's the blue colour, which we'll get rid of soon enough anyway. Right, okay. So, and then what we can do within that div, so it's this div, isn't it? What we can do then is we can add another element with an E, and this time it's going to be an image. Where are we? An image, okay. And we get like the default image that it gives us. And again, what we've got to do the same thing with the image is, let's say we've got an outline. So let's say I'm going to do this 30 by, it doesn't matter, 31 by, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll do 32 by 32 and I'll make the div 33 by 33. And I need to do the same with the image, turn it into a circle by giving it the radius. Where are we? Okay, 99, and that makes it a circle. Okay, and then we can, if we go click on our image and go to attributes, when we're dealing with images in HTML, then we always have the source attribute, and that's what Toddle is using. We've got that there, so we'll leave that there for now, rather than go and grab an image of somebody. At least we know what it means. Okay. So now let's move on to this one. So we've got our div. So we've kind of, anything we put inside this div, because it's a column container, will be stacked top to bottom. So let's add a couple of spans in there. So I'm going to do E again, span. Okay, and I'm just going to drag that down. There we go. And we can see that they're stacked top to bottom. Okay, so just let me make sure that this one is centered. So the reason that we dropped two spans in there is because each of these are styled slightly differently. One's bigger text than the other one. So that means that because we can style each span, it just means that we can give these separate sizes. Okay, so let's give this one a inherit. Let's do a size of base. Let's do it a little bit small. It doesn't need to be that big, small. And then the next one is going to be even smaller. So that means that we can just do extra small for that one. Okay. And we're kind of on the right track. Okay. We do need a little bit of space in between the image and these. The way that we do that is we go to the div that contains the whole thing, which is this one. Again, I'm going to do S to make sure I'm on the right one. User info container. No. Yes, it is user info container. Okay. I think I've named two the same, have I? Yeah, I have. Sorry. That's my bad. User avatar container, user. Okay. Whatever. But I need to create some space. Now, because that's a row container, any gap space I put on there is going to be sort of left to right. So if I go to styling now, and this is the gap container setting. So I'm just going to put, say, 6 pixels between them, just to create that little bit of a gap between there. I'm just going to give it some dummy text for now. I'm just going to call it, that's going to be user name. And then I'm going to do in here, it's going to say that's going to be admin. Okay. And we're kind of sort of starting to take shape with this one. So if I now refresh on what we've got, okay, it's starting to look okay. Well, I'll just get rid of this blue background now that we sort of don't need it anymore. Click to clear, and then we can then do reload again. Okay, so back in Toddle now. What we want to do is start adding our other elements up here in our top right of our header. So we go to our design. We just need, we've got like a line. That's fairly easy to do. And then we've got a couple of icons. Now, I don't want to go too deep into this just yet because we're just wireframing out at the minute rather than going into too much detail. So let's just go and put this little image here. So what I'm going to do is we're going to need like a left-hand border to our div where we put our user information. So let's go over here and into our div, which is this one. Sorry, it's this one. And what we can do then is just come down and we can say that we want a border. Here we go. And we only want it on the left. Okay. The color we can grab, but I'm just going to set it as a, let's just search on there. On their one. So let's say that will do. That will do as I think. So I think that will do. It's kind of, it's going to be far too close up to this one. So I can quickly just fix that just by putting a little bit of a, sorry, wrong option, little bit of a margin. Bloody hell, what was that? Sorry about that. A massive bang just went off. I think it was a firework. I hope it's a firework. Okay, so I'm just going to put like a 6 pixel margin there. I'm not particularly keen on doing it like that, but there we go. Actually, I'll see what we'll do. We will keep clicking that one. What I'll do is I will just stick it up to 10 pixels, which is a bit more like it. So then we've got that there. So if we have a look, then we've got a bell icon, an alert icon. Again, we can put this dot there. I just don't want to go too deep. I want to keep things moving along as quickly as we can. So let's get the bell icon from an icon library. Now, I like to use Iconify, which is at iconify.design. There are other people who like using tabular icons, things like that. It's entirely your choice. I like Iconify because there's literally tens of thousands of different icons in loads of different icon sets. So what I'm looking for is, it's usually under alert. Okay. So what have we got there? I'm looking, oh, perfect. 20 by 20, that will do. So scroll down and make sure SVG and SVG are selected. And then here's the SVG code. Just click here to copy that. That's our image. And then back in Toddle, all I need to do is to click on the main container that I want to add that into. Actually, that's the user info container, into the header container. And then I'm just going to, with that highlighted, I'm just going to do Command V or Control V. Okay, and then that's going to put that on there. Now, because we set our header container, all right, sorry, not a header container, our right hand header container, we set it to be right aligned. Okay, then that means that this one has now gone over to the right side. So I don't want to do it to the left yet. I still want to keep it as though we're right aligning things. We can do that at the end. So for the minute, I'm going to just push this to the top of our div. So it becomes a left hand, so it becomes on the left hand side and leaves that on the right hand side. We can't really see it. Okay, and this is something Toddle really that I think they're going to address, because lots of people mention it, is that the canvas is always this color. So kind of, you're trying to do like a light mode and your text is dark, then you can't really do it. Now, when you run it, it's fine. So if we run this now and we reload it, we can see it's absolutely fine. So what I'm going to do, just to make sure we can see things in the editor, is I'm going to go right to our top level div. I'm just going to set a background color here so that we get, I'll set the hex color actually for now. I'll just set that to be white. Okay, so that we can see things on the page for now. And it won't make any difference when we run it because it's still the same color regardless. Okay. So that's very close. So that means there's no gap space in between our SVG and our other one. So what we'll do then is I will have some gap space in here. So if we look there, so that we can, when we have gap space in here, essentially it's a row container. So we're going to have gap spacing left to right. And these are the two elements that we're adding them between. So I'm just going to put some gap spacing up here of, let's say, I'm going to add 20 pixels, I think. I think we're kind of along the right lines. That's fine. Okay, this, let me check the size of this. Right, okay, because we picked a 20 by 20 image, didn't we? So let's go back and make this a bit bigger. You're always better getting an image that's closer to the actual size you want rather than getting one that's a different size and then sizing it differently here. So let's pull up one that's, say, 24, but there, that one, perfect, 24 by 24. Again, I'm going to just copy that into the clipboard, back into Toddle, and I'm going to delete that actually, this one that we've already got, delete that. And I'm going to paste the new one in. I'm going to drag it back up to the top. Okay, gap spacing, yeah, that's more like it. It's more the right size. Okay, so the next one quickly is like an envelope icon. So let's go and have a look at that, like a mail icon. Mail. Okay, plenty there, plenty to look through. What does it look like? See if we can match it slightly. So it's kind of like a rounded edge with a gap there. So I can't see anything really there that looks like it. Let's try paste to mail. Well, I mean, it's come up with lots of options. This is what I love about the Iconify. This is kind of like it, but I won't spend too long on this. But let's just spend. Yeah, no. Let's have a look. Right, last one, and I'll just pick one then. No, still nothing. Wow. Okay. Right. Actually, there's one with the dot built in there that we could use. Okay, I'm going to pick this one. This one is probably as close as I've seen. So you see how big it is? I'd rather have someone that's a bit smaller than that. 24 by 24, perfect. So we'll go there. We'll copy that into here. And again, we're just going to paste that into that container. We're going to lift it up so it's the top one again. So it's the nearest one. All good. Okay, and then we've got like this search box. I don't really want to get too deep into this one, but we'll just have a quick go. So let's reload the app so that we can see what we've done. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so probably the way that we'll do this one is we'll probably just put the div around it and then just put a couple of things in the div rather than actually create an input box, because we're not really doing that level of detail just yet. So we'll create a div that includes that background. Then we'll stick an SVG there for the image, and then that we won't put that in there. So we're going to need a div that's going to be a row container because it's going to have these side by side. Okay, no problem. So it's probably about 100 pixels, something like that. So what we'll do then is let's close these up. And what we'll do is we will do E and then div. Okay, we'll push that to the top again. Again, we can reverse those once we're a bit more with it and decide how we're going to do. So we'll go into styling and we want a width of, let's say, 100 pixels. We want a height of 100%. Okay, we probably didn't need 100% actually. We probably just need like 60%, something like that. I don't know. So probably need much more than 100 actually. Must make it 200. Okay, and we want to make sure that whatever we put in there is centered on the left. Okay, centered vertically so that we get that effect rather than anything being at the top of the bottom. So the color of that one, we'll just keep it as I mean, it's going to be the same color as this, but we're not getting into that. That's going to come in a little bit. So I'll just give that a background color for now of one of Toddle's colors. There we go. It's not going to be exact by any means, but let's just pick that one. It's too dark, isn't it? Okay, let's go for that one then. That'll do for now. Okay, so it's got rounded edges as I see. Yeah. Okay, so again we use a radius for this, but we don't want it to be completely round as we did with the other one. So just going to give that a radius of say 12 pixels. Probably too much. Let's give it 8. That will do for us, I think. And then we want the image, so we'll have some padding at the side so that we so that it's not quite up against the side. So we'll do that. So in our div, which one we're working with? We're working with that one. So we then want to put some padding of let's say 12 pixels. Okay, I think we'll see when we add it. So now we want a magnifying glass. So I'm going to go over to here. I'm going to say that I want a magnifying glass. Okay, that seems to come up with magic or something. So I don't think. Okay, let's hone it down a little bit more. There we go. So again, we want something that's around about 24. What's that one? 14, 24, perfect. Okay. So again, we're just going to copy that, put it into Toddle, and inside this div, we're now going to just paste that in. Okay. It's a little bit big really for what we have in there, but we're okay for now. We'll just leave it as it is. And then we can put some text in there and just add an element. Again, I'm going to use a span. And the text is, I didn't change it right. It needs to be a row container because we don't want it top to bottom. We want it side to side. So if we have a look here, we can just change that to a row container. And you probably noticed, by the way, that in what Toddle does, to give you a little bit of a visual clue, is when it's a row container side by side, you see these blocks like this. And then when it's a column, you see them like that. So it's a little bit more obvious. So we're going to need some gap space in there because they're too close to each other. So we'll go to that div, and I thought I had added some gap spacing. No, I haven't. No, wrong div. Okay, so let's say that's we'll go 12 pixels, I think. Okay. The text is too big on the span, so we will just set that size to be small. Again, I'm picking up the Toddle's style variables, and we'll go through exactly what you're meant to do with those because you're not limited to just what they give you there. Okay, we could just literally type in anything we wanted in there. So we could say we want a 36 pixel. So I've gone and picked the wrong div. Okay, we could just literally, where are we on the span? There we go. We can see that that's just translated into 0.875 rem, but we could put anything that we like in there. It doesn't have to be from the style variables. We could put 42 pixels. Okay, we can do whatever we want, but we can also set up our own style variables. We're not just limited to what Toddle gives us there. So we're kind of looking a little bit like what we've got. Let's just preview this, reload it. Okay, not exactly, but we're not too worried at this point. Probably need bigger gap space in there, but we're kind of getting there. Okay, so what I want to really do now is to move on because I don't want this to be 5 hours long, is to actually look at doing the navigator bar here, because that's kind of key to everything else that we do. So back in Toddle, a couple of little things actually I just wanted to clear up. The first one is that shouldn't say span, it should say search. It's a little bit dark actually compared to the text that we have in there. So let's just sort that out on the span. So the color, text color. I don't think we have a great deal of options, to be honest with you, about this one. That'll do, I think. Okay, not very visible, but it'll do us for now. The other one was, this hasn't sat well with me. So let's have a look. I set that as a margin. Margins are kind of like the setting of last resort. So I'm going to get rid of margin there. And on the overall container of our user information, I'm just going to put some padding on there. I'll actually just put some left padding, let's say 10 pixels, and that'll do the same effect, but I'm using padding rather than margin, which is the best way to do it. Okay, so let's just reload, and we should get what we want. Yeah, that's pretty good. Okay, so our navigator down here, we've got our menu options, and they're kind of broken down. We've got like the menu one, we've got the sales channel one, and we've got the fairly generic options that are aligned to the bottom. Okay, so what we could do is just put these individually, the icon, the label, another icon, another label, or what we could do is just to put one icon and one label and then have it reference something in memory that it then repeats to display all of these. Okay, so in other words, we'd have like a list of options in memory. Okay, and in Toddle, that's what we call an array. An array is a list, effectively. Okay, and then for each menu item, we might need to store different pieces of information, such as the name that gets displayed, maybe some reference to the icon, and maybe something else that it needs to do, which we'll cover later on. So when we need to store more than one piece of information about something, it's kind of like a record, or what we call it in development, an object. So if you can imagine that you've got an array, which is a list, and the things that are in that list are what we call objects. So let's see how we do that. So let's start with the first three: dashboard, orders, and products. So in Toddle, obviously all we've done so far is a little bit of design. Now we're getting into more of the real crux of what makes Toddle a fantastic no-code tool. So if we just click anywhere other than anywhere on the canvas, or we can just press escape. Okay, and what we get is to our page settings here, and we've got variables, APIs, formulas, workflows, etc. So what we can do then is to actually set up a new variable, and this variable is going to be our array of objects, as we discussed, that's going to represent our navigation options. Okay. What is interesting though is the way that this is broken down into menu and sales channels. Okay. So we're obviously going to deal with that, but let's just deal with, let's say, this section of the navigator now for these options. Okay, so dashboard, orders, products. So let's have a look at that. So I'm going to create a new variable by clicking plus, and it wants me to give it a name, so I will give it nav options. Okay, and rather than set it here, which could be quite cumbersome, I'm actually going to click this FX button. Now, if you haven't used Toddle before, then this FX, which basically means formula, is really the heart of Toddle. This is really where everything happens. Now, lots of other things that go on, and there are different concepts, but to me, formulas are where the rubber hits the road, or the pedal hits the metal, whichever, or whatever. You know what I mean. So we can just press the formula, and we go into our formula editor here. Okay. And initially, by default, it displays kind of half the screen across, but we're going to go into full screen, and we do that by pressing the full screen icon there. Okay, and what we're going to do is I'm just going to sort of scroll up using the mouse wheel to put that to the top. And like I say, the first thing we're going to do is we need to create an array, which is a list. Whenever you think of array, just think of a list. So we're going to click this, and we're going to say array. Now, the way that we refer to arrays is that each one can contain anything effectively. And in our case, as I say, we want it to contain an object. So I'm going to click plus to add a new item into the array. And that first one is going to be an object. So what I could do is just have a straightforward list of these options, of the labels of the option, the dashboard, the orders, the products, the customers, all of that type of thing. So, but rather than do that, I'm actually going to create an object for each one. So the way I do that, I'm going to click to plus rather than type something in. So in other words, that I could type something in. So for example, like the first one is dashboard. Okay, and I could build up an array quite happily of that. orders and products and things like this. And that's probably a good place to start. But let's get into things a little bit. So okay, I'm going to add one there, and I'm going to say the input to this first item is not just going to be a straightforward string. A string is just a text. Okay, so I'm going to add that, and I'm going to say that I want this to be an object. And then I can add different properties into that object. So just as purely as an example, I need the label, and I need something to do with the icon that makes it special to this option. And also I might need to give it some clue about what it's going to do once the user selects it. Okay, and we're going to go through this in a little while. Don't want to get into it too much now, but we are going to have a little bit of text that's going to point to this. Okay, so let's start with that. So the first one is going to be, let's call this label, and that is going to be dashboard. Okay, and then I'm going to call this icon. I'm just going to leave that for now because we can come back to that. And I'm then going to say, I'm now going to call this a route or a route, as our American friends like to say. And I'm just going to leave that blank as well. So at the minute, we've just got three properties in our object. It's got a label, it's got an icon, and it's got a route or a route. In fact, I'll say route, which is a little bit odd to my ears, but I appreciate that most people outside the UK who are speaking English will use the phrase route, which has a totally different meaning to us English people or British people. Anyway, I digress. So we've created this object, so now I want to create another one. And what Toddle does is very handily makes a copy of the first one for us, so we can keep using that. So if we look here, then we've now got orders. Okay, and again, we're going to leave that blank. Now, what I'm going to do, what you can do in Toddle is zoom in and zoom out to give yourself more space. And the way you do that is you hold down either the Control if you're using Windows or Command if you're using a Mac, and you can then just zoom in and out as you like. Okay, so I'm just going to give us a bit more space. One of the other things you can do as well is you can hold down the space key and you can just drag it around so that you can give yourself that little bit more room. So what we'll do as well now is just let's have a look at this output, because what Toddle's doing there is to say everything you've done in your formula, this is what it's going to spit out. Okay, this is what it's going to look like. And so what it gives us is these two nodes, 0 for the first option and 1 for the second option. That's just a common programming methodology whereby the first item in the array always begins with what we call an index or a number of 0. So imagine a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in programming in general, but in Toddle it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 instead. Okay, so that's what it gives us there, is the first item, which is index 0, gives us this object with these properties, and then 1 gives us this object with these properties. Okay, so let's add a third one, which I think was products. Okay, and if we look here, products, and let's add customers. Okay, another one. Let's add customers. Okay, and then analytics, so we're going further down. Okay, and last one I think was marketing. Marketing. Okay, so again, as we're adding these, we can see the output is doing that. So what we're doing then is the output of this formula, because it's in here, it's actually setting, whatever we do in this formula is setting that value to a variable called nav options, and the value that it's setting it to is what is contained in this output. Okay, so if we look here, this is what we call JSON data, which is to do with JavaScript, and essentially it's just saying that the array is denoted by the opening square bracket, so everything inside this is part of an array, and then when we see a comma, that's the end of each item. So what we're saying in the array there is that an object is always defined by opening and closing curly braces. And then we've got the name of the property with a semicolon with the value that's being assigned to that property. So this is kind of programming format for what we've just done, but this is nicely formatted Toddle version of it. Okay, so we can then just look around and we can see what we need to see. Okay. But fundamentally, all we've done is create a variable that's got a list of the options that we're going to need on our navigator. So we now want to implement this on our navigation bar. So I'll just close everything else up and just work on our navigation div, which we created earlier on. Okay. And let's say that we want to create a div that's going to have our logo in there. We won't do that just yet, but let's say that we're going to do that. So it's already a column containing, which is what we want because it's going to be stacked on top of the other. So let's just do an E and a div. Okay, and then we will just quickly just give that an ID of logo container. And we'll just give that some standard space so that we know what we're doing. So we'll just give that, let's say, 50 pixels. Okay. And what we'll do is we'll create some padding at the top and the bottom because we have that just a little bit there. We have more at the bottom, but we can deal with that. So let's say we have, say, 24 padding. I'm absolutely useless at guessing. The padding, I just have an idea in my head and then I try it and it's never right, but still it's all trial and error at the end of the day. So I'm just going to go to this one and I'm going to create padding here. This is the padding where you want to create it top to bottom. So I'm just going to give it a padding of 24. Okay, and then that gives it that little bit of a gap at the top. And then I'm going to do some gap spacing. So in other words, the spacing between the items that come between. So all that will do then is, it's just give us this bit of space here that we want, although the navigator will be contained in all of this. So, okay. So yeah, some gap spacing again, because it's a column, the gap spacing will be vertical spacing. So we'll just make that, let's say, 30 pixels. So anything that we now add into as additional divs will be 30 pixels below the one, below this one. So now let's create the div. So I'm going to do E and then div. But what we can do is to make all of this be part of this div and then create separate ones where we need it. So what I can do there then is I can then again go to our flex box and I can make that flex. Okay, and you can see that stretched it to cover the entire space. Okay, and then now I've done that, within that we then can put our bottom options and then our top options above that. So we'll create two divs for that inside of this one. So just let me go through that again. We've got our overall navigator div. Then we've got our space to put the logo. And then we've got where we're going to put our options. And now I'm going to create two more. One is going to contain all of this here. And one is going to contain all of this. Okay. Now, what we can look at with this one is that, do you remember when we were looking across here and we did space between? Because we wanted this to the left and we wanted this to the right. We can do the same thing vertically by making this at the top and this actually space out to the bottom in the same way as these were spaced out to the right. So let's add a couple of divs, but before we do that, we'll add the divs first. That's fair enough. So we will do E and then div, okay, and do the old, copy it down to create another one. It's probably easy just to do E and div, to be honest. But anyway, so what I want to do then is let's give this some space initially. Okay, what we're actually going to do is to make it fit to the content, which it will do, but we want some space to actually see. We want to see it. So let's just create that height of, let's say, 100 pixels. Let's make it 300 instead. And this bottom one, which is at the minute is just displayed there, we're going to make that to be, let's say, 150 pixels, just to give us some space. So what we want this one, which is going to contain these options, to now go to the bottom, to ensure they're spaced out to the bottom and not just directly underneath that. So the way that we can do that is simply go to the div that contains them, and we go over here, and what we can do then is to actually we can double click on this option here. Okay, so let's see if that has worked for us. Okay, we can see that it has. So I'm going to make the width of both of these to be 100%. Okay, and that way they're guaranteed to be the full width of their container. So we can see that that's happened there. So what we'll do is I'll just put a background color just like we did before, so that we can see it. Pink. Okay, so we've got these spaced out, and again, that was because we did, where are we? That was because we double clicked on here, and because this is a column container stacked top to bottom, when we did double click and we get this setting of auto here, what that means is that it's done top to bottom. So I've now undone that, and we can see it's sat flush to the bottom. We do that again, and we do that. Now, with the other one at the top, that was made so when I double click, it was spaced across, and that was because that was a row container. Okay, so yeah, so if I go, where are we? So the whole thing, we can see that because that was a row container, when we did the double click to create auto spacing, it was spaced across left to right. Because this is a column container, it's now top to bottom. Okay, so that's what we've got there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take away the spacing now, not the spacing, sorry, the background color, because we don't really need it. Okay, and yeah, so what we need now is to display our navigator. Now we'll come back to the menu thing in a bit, but if we look to implement these options here, so let's focus on displaying the label, just the label alone first, and we'll focus on the icon shortly. So what we can do then is I now want to create a div that contains each option in the menu. Okay, so let's just close everything up that I don't need. So this is the div. These are all our things. I'm not naming them at the minute, which is kind of quite naughty, but still. Logo header. So let's just do that, and that's let's call it menu container. Okay, and we'll just do an ID main menu container, and this one is going to be ID. We'll just call these settings menu container. Right, okay, so we're going to focus on this one now. So I'm going to create a div, and that div is going to represent a menu option. Now we probably, if you look there, we want some padding down the side of these. Now, if you look, when you highlight an option, they don't seem to have kind of like a background. It just changes color. So we don't need to worry too much about giving it some padding. We can just do that. So I'm going to do that on the main nav container rather than anything else, because yeah, it's just probably the best way to do it. Do it as high a level as we possibly can, unless we need to adjust it further down the tree. So I'm going to give it some padding of let's say 18 pixels. It might not be enough, but we can adjust it later on. Probably isn't enough actually. Let's go to 24. Okay, and yeah, that's probably a bit better. Give it that right spacing. So now if we go to this one now we want to create a div that's going to represent the menu option. So I'm going to do E and div again. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're just going to set that to be a static height that we want for this. So I'm going to set it to, let's say, 40 pixels, okay? And then that's enough there. If we have a look, yeah, it's going to be about right. And we also want to space these a little bit. We don't want to one on top of the other. So I'll tell you what, I'll reduce the size of that to, let's say, 36. And we'll put some gap spacing, again, because we're on a column container, which we can see by this and by this. Any gap spacing that we put in is vertical gap spacing, okay? So I'm going to put just 12 pixels between the two options, and we'll see if that's too much or too little, we'll see. Okay, so now we want to put a label inside of this option div. So I'm just going to I'm going to add a span as I've done before, so we can then do E and then start typing span, and we've got a span on the page. So what I want to do then is maybe just style this a little bit. So I'm going to go into here and yeah, okay, let's say I want the size to be slightly smaller. Again, this can all be adjusted. I'll keep the color as is. Let's have a look. Yeah, inherit that color. Okay, and that is our option effectively. So now what we want to do, we want to display this. So it can't be static text, because what I want it to do is to display the text of the actual option that I'm dealing with as it's drawing it on the page. And remember, we've made those dynamic by including them in a variable rather than in statically on the page. So what I'm going to have to do then is to make this div, which represents the menu option, I want that to repeat for all of our items. So we've got an array with an object in it representing each individual option, and I want Toddle to repeat that array using this item. Okay, so the way to do that is I'm going to right click on that and I'm going to select repeat. And then what repeat does is say, okay, well, you're asking me to repeat this element based on what? Okay, and what we're going to do is to give it our array. So in other words, it's going to repeat over the array. So this is our menu here. So our nav options variable with our items in. So I'm going to pick that. Okay, and let me make sure I pick it. Yep, there we go. And we can see what it's done is it's actually repeating for as many items or objects as we have in our array, how many elements that we have in our array. So that's great. Now we want to display the label. Okay, so we can do that in our span. Before we do that, just let me click on this. I'm just going to make sure that's centered within the container. Okay, and so on our span, that's fine. So on our text, what we can do is we've got another little FX thing here, the FX button. And whenever you see that, that means that you're allowed to assign a formula to it, which effectively means it can be dynamic. Okay, and Toddle is extremely dynamic in what you can do. So we're going to click on that. And what we want to do is to pick up each item that it iterates over. We need to refer to the item that it's actually dealing with in the array as it's looping round and as it's repeating round and displaying that. And so the way we want to do that is we want to click on here, and because it recognizes that we're inside a repeated element, it gives us the option to refer to the item that we're currently dealing with, which in our case will be the object. So I'm going to select that, and it's going to say, okay, item is an object and it's got three properties. Which one do you want to use? So I want to display the label. And we can see what happens straight away is that we get those options displayed. Fantastic. I hope that makes sense, but effectively we've created a variable. Sorry, wrong one. I don't need that one. Thank you very much. We've created a variable, which is an array, which is effectively a list. So let me go full page with that one and zoom out. Okay, so probably need to zoom in a little bit more than that. An array of objects, and it's basically looping over each item that's in this array because we've set that array as the repeater, as a repeat source, then that means that we can refer to that. And then within this repeat, within this loop, if you like, then we have full access to the current item that we're looping over using in our formulas, using the item property that Toddle gives us. Okay. I hope that makes sense. So now we've done that and we've created, so instead of creating one for dashboard, one for orders, one for products, one for, instead we're just creating one div and we're repeating over it. What we can do then, if we now run this, reload, there we go, we're starting to get our navigator options being displayed. Let's have a look at putting our icon on there. Now, this is a kind of a technique that I sometimes use. It depends if you want to, if it's something that works for you. This only works really with fairly simple SVGs in terms of the icons you display, but you can make it quite dynamic if you want to. So let's have a look. So let's say we want an icon for the dashboard. So what I want with that one is kind of like a pie chart. So if let's take a look at chart and see what we get. That one, we've got a pie chart. Now I'm looking for something that just has kind of like one element to it. So like this one or that one. So let's go for, we want something that's say 24, that'll do. So yeah, I think that will do. Will it? Yeah, why not? Okay, so now then, what we don't want to do now is, because if we just copy that and paste it, that's then a static image, a static SVG on our page. We actually want something that's a bit more dynamic than that. So again, this is the technique that I use sometimes, not all the time. We'll use it in this case because it's just going to highlight the point. Is if we look at this SVG code here, I don't want to get too technical by any means, but the property or the attribute that says D equals there, the information after that is actually kind of the encoding of the SVG. That's the encoding of what the SVG will look like. Okay, so what I do is I copy that, not the whole SVG, just the information that's inside the D attribute of the SVG. Because of the way this is going to work, we don't use too complicated SVGs because they can have multiple D attributes. Okay, so that will throw the whole thing. But when they've just got a single D attribute, it works absolutely fine. So I'm going to copy that. What I'm going to do, I'm not going to copy it on the page. I'm going to go into our variable, into our formula for that variable. And this one is for the dashboard. I'm going to paste that into the icon property. And I'm going to click plus. Okay. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to drop an SVG into this option div. Okay. Now I want it to be side by side. I want it to be the left of the label. So that means this div now has to be a row column. So I'll just select that. Okay. And now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to paste an SVG from our other one because I just want a sample SVG. I'm just going to copy. I'm just going to paste. I'm just going to drag it upwards. Okay. So all of those have just got magnifying glasses. Okay. So what I want to do then is, rather than have a static one, what I'm going to do, I'm going to click on the SVG. And if we go to attributes, sorry, actually it's not the SVG, it's the one underneath it, what we call the path. Okay. And we'll notice that we've got a D attribute built in that Toddle's read automatically from the SVG that we put in before. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear this out. Okay. I'm going to blank that all together. And sorry, I'm going to need to add it in again, aren't I? So what I'm going to do with this one is I'm now going to assign a function to it. Sorry, not a function, a formula to it. Like I say, whenever you see this, it means you can assign a dynamic value to it. These are static, that's static, that's static, but this is a dynamic value. So what I can do now is I'm going to say, okay, the D attribute is not going to be static, it's going to be what is in the current items icon. Okay, well, we can see right away what happens is that we get our little pie chart that we just copied the D attribute from. And because of that, we can now have dynamic SVGs that we can read off of the array that we've put in there. Okay, so let's give this a bit of gap spacing because it's too close. So we go to our nav box and into styling, and then we can put some gap spacing of, let's say, 12. Is that about right? We'll just say, yeah, why not? It might not actually be big enough, but we'll see. We'll leave it as it is. Is there any difference in colours? Yes, that's more of a darker colour than perhaps that. So we can look at the colours. Again, that's more into styling than anything else. So we can do that. So let's look at orders. What do they use as the orders? So they're using like a shopping basket. So in Iconify, let's see what we can, or like a checkout. Let's see what checkout does. Gives us. So let's try and find, let's see if we can, oh, it's more of a cart, isn't it? We call it a cart. Okay. And sorry, am I totally looking at, I'm looking at the, I need to look at the basket, isn't it? That's the one. This one looks quite like it. How big is that? 24 by 24. This might work. Let's give this a go. Okay. Okay. There we go. We've got something that looks like it. Not great. Just another tip as well is that if you come in here to edit the variable, whatever you do, don't touch the raw JSON data, because the minute you do, you'll lose this. Okay. So you'll have to go and start changing things in here rather than actually doing it through the formula editor. Okay. So again, we can make better choices with that. And in between, when I take a break, I'll do that. But I just wanted to show you what's going on. Let's do one more, which is for product. And that looks like a briefcase. I think a box always looks nicer, I think, to represent that. Let's have a look at a box. Yeah, much more fun. So let's see if this one will do us. How big is that? It's only 16. And there bigger versions of that. 24, that will do. That's fine. Have we got a straightforward D? We seem to have. Let's see whether it will translate. Again, to our nav. So that's our dashboard, that's our orders, that's our products. And so you need to give that the key. And boom. Oh no, that looks pretty terrible actually. So again, I'll give it, let's try something else then. Try that one. If this doesn't work, I'll go away and I will fill these in manually. This is just, oh no, there's multiple D's in there, I'm afraid. Multiple D attributes, so we can't use it. Let's try the next page. Okay, so will these do? Will these work? 20 by 20, 24. Let's see if they've got multiple D's. No, they don't. So let's give that one a go. I think I've used this one in the past. Paste that in. That's the one. That looks better, doesn't it? Okay. So anyway, I won't bore you anymore with these. I'll go away and I'll fill these in and make them look decent, pick decent ones in there as well. So the idea then is that we're making our navigator bar dynamic, including the icons as well. Again, if you want really much more specific and polished ones, then there are ways around that. I'm not going to cover that in this particular video because we need to move on. But we're sort of starting to get there with our navigator. I've now added all of these options in there, and also added an icon for each one. Again, just using the same method that I was showing you earlier on. So let's take a look at the next step. So what we've got here is that we've got this menu, we've got this sales channel here that are breaking the navigator bar up a little bit. So because we're just using one div and then repeating over it, we need to sort of find a way of working out how we can get these things in there, because it's not going to be just a matter of just inserting a label and putting it there because it's being repeated. So if we have a look in here, what we've got is, let's close everything else off. Okay, so like I say, we've just got one div that's got the SVG for the icon and the label. Okay, and it's doing that dynamically, so we just have one within a repeat. So we don't really know where the menu and the sales channel from our design is going to go. And again, it's not really important. I'm not going to build this app out fully because I don't know what it does. It's just, in fact, it doesn't do anything. It is just a design in itself. I'm just trying to get across the point that no matter what designer you choose, you can replicate it, or that you can kind of take inspiration from it and implement it in Toddle without being a designer. It's all possible no matter which design you pick. So I just want to show that you can do it effectively. So what we need to do then is to find a way to put a menu above there and a sales channel above integrations like we've got in here. Okay, so what we can do, because we've got options, what we can do is on the object, there's two objects, the dashboard and the integrations, where we've got a subgroup header above it, is what we can do is to add a property just to those individual objects in the navigator list or array. So if we go over to our variable and we'll edit the formula. Okay. Okay, so up to the dashboard. So what I can do then is to add another property just into this object here. So I can just click plus. I'll call this group and I'll call it menu. Okay, and then the idea is that is what this is, just for this option above it. I'll do the same thing for the integrations option down the bottom. So where are our integrations? So I'm going to add the same thing and I'm going to call it a group. Okay, and this one is going to be sales channel. Okay, so notice all the other objects now do not have that group property on there. So if we have a look at the output, we can see, yeah, there's our group, no group. Okay, so if on any of these objects we try and access a property called group, then what Toddle is going to do is return to us an undefined, a result called undefined, which means it's undefined. There is no such property as a group on option for orders, products, etc. So we can actually take advantage of that. So let's have a look at this. So we'll just close off our back in our design. So what we can do now is we can say, well, let's put a label above this when we do actually have a group property. So remember, we've got our group here. So what I don't want to do really is to start expanding this one, because effectively what we want is that needs to appear to live outside of it. Okay, so we're just trying to adapt our dynamic navigator into that type of design. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to place this inside another div. So the way to do that is right click and select wrap in an element. So I'm going to wrap that in a div. Okay, so it's done a couple of things, which is to change our gap spacing, because we had it on the div above it. So we had gap spacing of 12. So we'll just adjust that in this new div. Okay, and then that helps us there. So the idea then is that we can now put the repeat on this div instead, because this div now is just something that's going to live inside of the main div. So before we just repeating the option, now we're going to repeat the whole thing, where we're going to put our little menu option and our sales channel option. Okay, so I'm going to go into our repeat, and we can do that just simply by clicking the repeat icon that it gives us. Okay, and it just gives us that, so that's fair enough. So I'm just going to bin that one for there just for a second, and now I am going to right click and select repeat, and I'm just going to point it to the same variable. Okay, and then we get it back again. Okay, so now what we can do, we now have our main option, but we have a div that's around it. So what I can do inside of that div is add a span. So I'll do E and then span. Okay, and I'll just drag it above where we had that one so that we can see it here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, in the text, I'm going to point it to that group property that we added to just two of the objects. So if we go over here, I'm just going to point it to the current item in the repeat and to group. Okay. And what I'm going to do as well, because they show it in caps, okay, I'm going to convert that to uppercase. Okay. So if you look here, what's going on is that we've got the menu for the dashboard, which is where you put, and then we've got sales channel above the integrations, but for everything else, it's now saying null. So null is a value that means that there is no value, it can't find it. But it's actually, if we convert that into a text value, the actual text that it gives us back will be undefined. And so we can use that to make sure that we don't display this span or this span unless the object in the navigator that we're iterating over has a group property. Or let's put it this way, it has a value in the group property. So in our span here, what we can do then is we can right click and we can do show hide. And so show hide allows us to insert a formula that the output of the formula must be true for the item to be shown. And if it's false, then it doesn't get shown. So what we can do then is to say that we want the item and we want the group. And now what we can do is we can test for it by converting that into a string. Okay. And what we wanted to do is we only want it to be true if the value of item group is not undefined. Because if it's not undefined, then it's got value in there, which is either menu or sub menu, or what was it called now? I've looked at it often enough, I should know. Sales channel. Okay. So what we can do then is I will just say that it does not, not equal. And then what does it not equal? And then we can say undefined. Okay. So we can see what's happened there right away is that everything has gone away other than the menu. And obviously then if we click OK, we can see the sales channel exists. So just let's go through that again. What we've said is look at the group property of the current item that's being shown, convert that into a string, and a null value when you turn it into a string then becomes undefined. So what we're saying then, if it's not undefined, then it's going to return true, which means show that value, show that span. And if it is undefined, then don't show it. So effectively then, because the other items haven't got a group property, then that means that we're only going to show them the span for the ones that do have a group property. And then we can get that effect here. Okay. So we need to just organize some spacing. This is obviously much too big. So let's have a look at this one. So I'm going to change the size to be small. Yep, I think that's okay. We'll leave the color as it is for now. We need to look at some spacing next. So what we want then is some space above that. So what we've got at the minute is we've got quite a big gap spacing across everything. So where are we? Our navigator is there. So we've got some pretty hefty gap space in there. So we probably don't need all of that now because we can actually use this to give us the spacing that we need. So I'm just going to drop that down to 24 for now. That lifts it up a little bit. I'll tell you what, let's go down to 18. Okay, so there's only a slight gap between this one and what we have above it, which is where we're going to put our logo. And so what we need then, the spacing above it is pretty okay actually, that's not a problem. We can probably actually make that a little bit smaller, can't we? Because looking at the size of it, we probably can just do it to there. That's it, look good. And what we want is a space above it and the space above this one. So what we can do then is in our span here or on our div, we best put it on our span because this is the one that's only going to show it. So I'm going to go up to here and I'm going to say that I'm going to go to flex. Okay, and now it's a column, so it's top to bottom. So I want to put some top padding on it so that we've got some distance above that one and above this one. So I'm only going to put it at the top. I don't want it at the bottom as well. So I'm just going to click this. I'm going to say I want padding from the top of, let's say, 18 pixels. Okay, how does that look? I think that's looking pretty good, actually. Yeah, let's make it 22, a little bit more. Okay, and then yeah, we're really sort of showing that now. Now I don't think we need as much gap spacing between the actual individual items on there, so I'm going to change that to be, let's say, 8 pixels, and I'm probably going to then just change the gap spacing here a little bit. So it's 18. Let's change it to say 12 pixels. Okay, and yeah, lift it up a little bit. So we're kind of looking. We're looking pretty good, I think, at the minute. Okay, so what's next? We can look at this, and we still haven't done these options at the bottom. So what I could do, if I wanted to, I could just maybe copy that one div and just make them individual divs. I could certainly do that, but you know I'm not going to. So we're going to follow the same procedure as we did up here. We're going to try and use a dynamic list of options. And I'm just going to go through some things here just to introduce you to some concepts in Toddle, which is really going to help you, improve your understanding of Toddle overall as a development system. So if I go back and we look at our list of all of these options that we've got in our app, which is all held in this variable, and what I can do then is, let's say I want to, for example, add our new options to this list. Okay, so we've got all our main menu options, but I wanted to add the new one to our list as well. So I'm going to add all of those options to our list. There's nothing wrong with the approach of just putting them in as individual, elements on your tree. It's just that when they're relying on a dynamic system, then you only put one element on that and then you repeat it. And if you need to make a change, you're making a change in one place rather than in lots of them. So we've got 3 different options there. Okay, so this is our first one. So what's our option here? Settings. Okay. We'll deal with the icon later on. Okay, and the next one is get help. Get help. Oh, sorry, that's the last one. This one. Get help, and last one, log out. Now, if we just run that as is, let's just preview our app. We're going to get all of these at the bottom, a continuation of them, which we don't want really, because we want them at the bottom, and we created our div, our container earlier, to contain these options. So we don't want that. We don't want them as part of our main list of options. So what we need to do then is to filter those 3 items out of our list so they don't get included in here. So this is a fairly common set of logic that you will do when you're building out Toddle apps, because you're constantly dealing with lists and you're constantly trying to filter lists and trying to adjust lists and make changes, and just so that you can put a lot of logic on the front end of your application in Toddle. So we're going to use formulas for this. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to use the repeat formula that we put in earlier, which is our repeat, to say we repeat this div across all of the items in our array. So I'm going to click on this one. So what we're going to do now, rather than just grab it out of our nav options array wholesale, we're just going to grab everything, which is obviously what we're doing at the minute, and that's why we get our 3 bottom options. What we're going to do is we're going to filter this list. Okay, and the way we do that is we're going to add another node into here, and we're going to call that, we're going to call on the filter formula. Now, with Toddle, I haven't shown you this before, but we get lots and lots of built-in formulas in Toddle, and we can also build our own. Okay, so, but filter is the one that we want here. Okay, and so filter expects 2 inputs. So the first one is the array that it's going to filter. So we've already specified that, that's not an issue. And then what filter does is it kind of says, right, I'm going to loop over all of the items in our list, and you're going to tell me which ones you want to filter, to leave in or to filter out. Okay. And the way it does that is that we then get like a kind of a sub formula here. Everything to the left of this here now is going to be a formula that's going to be applied to every single item as it's kind of looping or repeating or iterating over each item in our list. And then what we need to say, as we come across each one, we then need to say, okay, yep, you're okay, you can go through. Nope, I'm filtering you out. Yep, you're okay. So it's kind of like, imagine a doorman at a nightclub or something, a bouncer, okay? And he's checking certain criteria. Are you wearing shoes or trainers? Are you wearing jeans? Do you have a tie on? I don't know. Never been to a nightclub where they insist on a tie. But anyway, the point is that the filter is kind of going to be your doorman to decide which of these ends up in the output. And that's what we're really doing here, is that whatever gets filtered through then becomes the list that we take out of filter, and then that's the output. And that's the output that's going to be displayed in our list on the screen in our navigator list. Okay. So what we're going to do then is I'm going to actually say that I'm going to look not at the item, I'm going to look at the index. Remember, the index is these numbers here. Okay, and I'm going to say that I'm only interested in those that are either 8 or below. I only want these. I don't want these bottom ones in there, which are our new ones we've added, our settings and get help and log out. Okay, so what I'm going to do is say, okay, so I've got the index, and I'm going to say is less than, and then I'm going to say, sorry, I want less than or equal to, really. I could say less than 9, but I'm going to say is less than or equal to 8 in there. And then we got our just that 8 options that ends in discount. Okay, so now if we go back, we can see it on the screen. Actually, it's done it for us. But if we reload the app, we can see that's going to take off those other options. Okay, and that does that nicely. Now, one other way that we could do it is to have some kind of a flag or another property on each of these options in our array. Let's say called main options or something like that, and then they would be true for all of these and they would be false for the other ones. That's probably the better way to do it, because that way, if we add more options that we want on here, that's not going to break it. But still, we'll leave it as it is because we need to move on. So what we need to do then is in our bottom group that we put here, that's going to be displayed at the bottom, we kind of need a duplicate of that, but looking at a different list. So what I'm going to do is, let me see there. So that's that one. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this with Command or Control V, and I'm just going to paste it into our bottom div and do Command or Control V. Okay. So with this one, I'm going to change this repeat here now. It's going to be exactly the same one, but I'm just going to say is greater than, so I can do that, greater than or equal to 9. So in other words, I only want these bottom ones. And so I just get our 3 options there at the bottom. Okay. So again, filter is a way to filter over a list or an array and that meets some condition that you actually want as an output. And it does that effectively by having a sub formula here. And then this gets run over every item in the list. So it's going to start with this item, and then it's going to filter it yes or no. If it's true, then it gets added to the list that's output. If it's false, then it's not going to get output. Okay, so in our case here, if the index is greater than or equal to, then that's going to return true if it's 9, 10 or 11, and then it's going to output it here. Otherwise, it's going to filter that out. So all that we get is those three options. And the same applies with the other one. So if we now say that we can see that we just get our bottom options here. Okay. So what we can do then, I'm going to take the height off that, because then that is just going to be the height of the options that we've got. Okay, don't worry too much about the icons. Next time I take a break, I'll fill those in. We've already been through the process of how we do that. And so, okay, that's our menu, which is very similar to this. Maybe there's a little bit more space at the bottom, so we can probably do that by adding some padding into our div here, some bottom padding. So we'll go here, click there, and we'll just say we want a padding of, let's say, 24 pixels. Okay, and that will probably lift it up a little bit, just enough to make it better than yeah, similar to that one. Okay, so our menu, our navigator is pretty much done now. Obviously, we need to do some more, such as deal with hover states, and obviously when they click it, which we will deal with shortly. But before we move on, I want to start looking at styles, because at the minute we've just kind of set things at standard color, which are based on the colors that come with Toddle. So I just wanted to spend some time looking at that now. Okay, so I've added these icons in here, so they're looking better. And one other thing that I've done is I've added some gap spacing of 8 pixels between the options. Okay, so if you're following along, then you can put that in there as well. So the next thing I want to look at now is to look at styling, because at the minute we're just using our standard colors. So I want to look at Toddle's features around styling. So if we come over to our left hand side into this little icon here for files, and we click that, and what we see is that we've got a list of the pages that we've got, which have only got 2. There's no components yet, and no axes, formulas, etc. We can go through those in another video. But I'm interested in this section here, which is themes. So I believe that there are plans afoot to have multiple themes. Okay, but at the minute we just have the default one. So that's the one that we'll look at. So when we go, and what we get here is essentially all of our themes, and we can set styles for colors, spacing, fonts, font sizes, font weights, and Z index. So what we'll look at for now is the colors. So Toddle gives us kind of a range of sort of standard colors, which you saw me selecting from before. Okay, and these are all hidden behind variables. So when you pick orange 200, you're actually getting this hex code color. But by having our own style variables, our own color variables, what we can do then is assign different colors, and then enable us to kind of have standard colors and making sure that we're consistent throughout our application. So let's look at our own app, and let's look at our menu here, our menu options. And if we look at this, our sample, now again, I don't encourage just copying strictly off of the off of the template or whatever that you're using to do this, like we're doing here. So what I would suggest that we do is or that you do, is to grab the colors from your template and then just make adjustments, or maybe make complete changes depending on the color scheme that you want. In this one, I'm just going to copy it directly. I'm just going to lift it directly, just because it's just quicker and easier to do it that way. You know, I'm not creating a commercial app here. I'm creating a tutorial, so this is never going to see the light of day other than as part of the tutorial. So if you're using Chrome, then there's a Chrome extension here, which is called Eyedropper. Okay, and that's what I use to grab colors off pages and things. So I'll click the little pipette of the eyedropper, and I'll select pick a color, and I'll go over here and I'll pick the color of the font. So that's the font color that's being used on this page. So I'm just going to click it and that's going to copy it in there. So back in Toddle, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create my own colors group, which is going to appear at the top of the list. So let's just go down here and add a group. I'm just going to call it app. Okay, that's my color group. Okay, and it's dragged it right to the bottom. So what's going to happen now, I'm going to have to scroll all the way down to get at these colors now. So the best thing to do is to just drag it. So Toddle lets us do that and just lets us drag it to the very top. There we go, and I'll just put it in there, and then it's our first one. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a color, and I'm going to call this, what should I call this? Because let's have a look at where that color is used. It seems to be used, no, it's just a navigation color. So if you look here, there's much darker colors going on. So this, the one that's on here seems to be more of a kind of secondary color. So what I'll do is, what I can do there then is I'll just add that in and we'll give it a name of secondary text. Okay, and then I'll just paste this into the picker. Okay, and then we've got our color in there. So now let's say I want to go and pick our main color, pick a color, which seems to be this one. So we'll just click that. It's in our clipboard. So back in Toddle, I can now just say primary text. And I'm just going to copy that one in. Okay. So I'm just going to lift it up so that is actually going to be the first one. If it lets me do it, it does. Okay, so I can now use these to determine the size, the color that I've got on the navigator. So, okay, so if I go back into the files and I go back to my page, which is app, just click anywhere. And what I'm going to do is on the div is I'm going to set the color. Now, what I'm going to do is, like I said before, is it's best to set the color as high as you possibly can and let it cascade downwards. So this color doesn't really apply to anything above it, but it does apply to the actual div itself. So I can go all the way to the div here, this one. And again, I can just press S to check menu container. That one, navigator. Okay. So what I'm going to do there then is I'm now going to come down here and in my color, I'm now going to click this, which again is to select a variable rather than a specific custom color. And I'm going to select that's my secondary text. So we can see that everything in there now changed to that secondary text. So because that's going to be the default text, including, by the way, the icons, because what's happened is there's nothing in between there where a specific color has been set. So it's cascaded all the way down. Okay. So that's looking more like what we've actually got, which is quite good. The menu is kind of similar color. So I'm going to leave that. They might be a little bit lighter, but I'm just going to leave it. So the same thing happens on the actual header. However, the default color that's used more than anything looks to be the actual primary color that we've set. So if we go into our header, which is in our main nav, so what we can do then is actually set that in the same way as we set the secondary color as the text color on the nav. We can actually set the other color as the default color at the top. Okay, so what we can do then is just pick this and we can say that the primary text is that one. Okay, so nothing is changed in there yet, so let's see why. We got anything set? Okay, and the span. Okay, just let's make sure that sometimes we need to set these to inherit so that they can, so that it does it. Let's make sure everything is set to inherit. That now that looked like it changed now. That looked like it changed the colour. Okay. So yeah. So that looked like it changed. So let's go down here and make sure that it's explicitly set to inherit. And then hopefully we should start to see our changes. Yeah, there we go. That's definitely changed. Right, okay. Our span is definitely set to a specific colour because I remember us doing it. So with that one, we can change that maybe to the secondary colour just for that particular label. So we set that. That's a lot better. Now we can actually see that properly. We might have a special colour for placeholder text, but at the minute that will do for us. So okay, so these don't seem to have changed. So what we can do is, where are we? So the container of this is that one, which I think we have changed. So when it comes to these, when it comes to an SVG, it's important that what happens is that you actually need to go down to it's usually this way. It says stroke is current color. So what's happening with current color? I think it has changed actually. Yeah, I think it's just me being a little bit, But the point I'm trying to make is that on an SVG where you have, sometimes it's set on the path, sometimes it's set on another element, depending on the makeup of the SVG that you've imported. Usually get this way, it says stroke and then current color. And what current color means is that it's going to grab it from its parent or its container. So if its container in this case is set to, where are we? Is set to inherit, then we're just going to go up the tree until it finds it. So we've now set out all of our colors, but to the primary color. So let's have a look at what that looks like up here. So it looks like our user role is actually in our secondary color. So let's just go on and change that. So again, we can change that on the span that contains it. So we've got a color, and then we can say that is going to be the secondary text, and we can see that that changes. Okay. So this is just helpful in terms of how can we style the app without having to change absolutely every element every time, so that we know that we've got consistent colors and sizes and things like this across our application. Although at the minute I've only just dealt with colors. So let's just reload this, and yeah, it's starting to look a little bit better. I think we've got the right color. Yep, it certainly looks like it. Okay. So let's say, for example, now we look at this. So we've got this background in our main container, and then we've also got, it looks like the same color background there. So I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm just going to grab the pipette, pick a color, and I'm just going to grab that color. It's copied it directly to the clipboard this time, and I'm now going to go back to themes. And let's add a new color, and I'm going to call this content. Well, it's just suggesting one for me. So I'm going to call it content BG color. I'm not predictable, you see, what I name things. And I'm just going to paste that one in. Okay. Okay, and so what we can do now is, if we go back to our app, so let's just have a look. So our two top levels, we've got our nav and our main container, and then we've got our header, and then if we close that up, then we get the rest of it, which isn't there yet. So I can set the background color for that, and so I'm going to set it to that color we've just set. So we're going to set a background color, and I'm going to set it as our content BG color. Okay, and then we get that. So I may as well set this one as well up here. So we've got our div there, and I'm going to set that rather than use one of Toddle's colors. I'm going to use our own, and so we've got a similar type of color there. Okay. So because we've got padding on the right and on the left there, so let me check. Yeah, I want that color to go to the edges. So let's have a look at how we can do that. So we've obviously got some padding on there. So let me bring this up. So that's our header. This is our thing. The padding is on there. It's obviously on its container. Okay, so probably what I want to do then is take that padding off. That's going to change things a little bit, but I'm going to then, because that's the overall, if we do S, sorry, we're actually, the shortcuts don't work when you're in an input, obviously. So I picked the wrong one. So we do S, that's our main container, so that's where the color is, and that we don't want any padding there. So we'll set it actually on the individual header and content containers. So let's just do that. We'll put that to 16, and we'll do the same with this one. Okay, and that way we maintain the color, our background color, right across the space of the content. Okay, so this looks massive actually. This I know there's not a lot of padding down the left hand side, so it does look a bit too much to the left. Or is it? No, I think we're good. Okay, so let's just check on that. Yeah, I mean, the nav's just too big, the nav bar. So what we can do then is to set it, let's say, to 240. Okay, and that looks a bit better, but let's go 220. Okay, that looks a bit better. I know it's because the rest of it is actually within because there's a nav. This one is in a flex container where we've set flex to 1. Then it just automatically flexes across for us. Okay, so let's see how we're doing there. Okay, that looks a little bit better. We might put some padding on there, but we're not too worried at the minute. Yeah, okay, so we're doing okay with that. I just wanted to highlight the actual theme, the color themes. So if we want to take that a step further, let's say we want a primary button. Let's say that's our primary button color. So all we need to do with that one is color picker again, pick a color, and yeah, pick that one, copy it to our clipboard, and again go to our theme, and then we can just add a color, and then we can say that this one's going to be called a primary button, and we can just paste that in there. Okay, and then we can go on and on and on like that. What Toddle doesn't include actually a white color, so let's just put that in there as well, which is generally a background. So for example, here, if I'm not mistaken, that's white. It is white for all intents and purposes. So I'm just going to call that, I was going to call that content background actually, but just for now, I'm just going to call card BG. Because, again, we can just do, okay, with that one. And then it's just a case of then working out your color theme. You know, usually you tend to have one or two sort of theme colors, and the rest are more just kind of variations of that, just to separate content out. So it's a case of choosing those colors and deciding what you want to do. So the next thing that we want to do really is to look at, because this isn't a working app in terms of the layout, we don't know kind of how this works in terms of hover states. We can see that there's a selected state where the color is blue, which is probably the same color as that. But first of all, let's focus on the hover state. So back in the editor then, we want to take a look at, let's say, the label. So we click on the label on the span. So we've got a text color that is just inheriting at the minute, that we remember that just comes all the way from the navigator, which is our secondary text. So let's say we want that to go into, let's say the blue color that we created in our theme. So to do that, what we can do is fairly easy to do, is we come all the way over here on the right, and all we do is we just click to add a new style. And all we've got to do is to click the hover option. And then what happens then is, if you look, we've got two different styles now. We've got the default, we've got the hover. So anything that differs in the hover state, okay, can be put in here, and all the other settings will remain the same apart from anything that we change in here. So what we want to actually change is the text color. So we'll go down to text color and we'll pick our primary button color. Okay, and let's just try that out. Actually, we can try it out in the actual editor itself. Let's give that a go. We can do it. There we go. Okay, and that looks pretty good. Okay, obviously the icon doesn't, but all of these should do the same. Okay, so back into edit mode. What I also want to do there is to make sure that there is, just let me reload this one. I just want to make sure that the arrow changes to a point so that the user knows it's available to be clicked. So the way to do that, again, going back to the default state, scrolling down. So under effects, we get cursor and we can just put pointer. And that should do the job for us in that regard. There we go, nicely. Okay, so we could have done it a different way, because if you look, both the SVG and the span are contained in the same div. So what we could have done was, when the div is hovered, then we can essentially then set the hover state on the SVG and the span. If you remember, the color of the SVG is actually set in its first child element. In this case, it's path. And under attributes, we've got, sorry, we need to select the path. Under attributes, we have either a fill or sometimes it's stroke and current color, which means it's going to take the color, the text color, from its immediate parent, which is this div here. And also our span is in the div as well. So we'll go to our span, and what we'll do is I'm actually going to get rid of the hover state on this span. And instead I'm going to put it on this div, because this div essentially contains both of them, and also now, because there's no specific color on that span, it should inherit from its container. And if we look up here, then it's going to grab it from here. So we put a specific color on here on the hover state, then we should find that it will change both of these at the same time. So let's come up here, add a style, hover, and text is going to be our primary button color, our blue color. Okay, let's try that. There we go. Good stuff. Yeah. Okay, so that's how we do our hover state. Very, very simple indeed. Okay, so what about a select state? So we look in our example here. This colors it blue. So maybe we don't want the blue on the hover state, maybe more on just on the selection state. So instead of the color being blue on hover, let's say it's the darker color that we use elsewhere. So let's have a look at that one. So we'll change that hover and we will put it to be the primary text color. It's a bit darker, so as we scroll, yeah, as we hover, sorry, you'll get this. Okay, so what about when we select it? How can we have a select state? So what we're going to do now is we need it when the user clicks on this, we need something to happen to set something to say that this option is the one that's currently selected. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new variable for that on the page. It's going to store the option that's selected. Okay, so I'm going to create a variable and I'm going to call this selected. Okay, and what we can do actually, we can just store a number in this, which is the index of the value that's selected. So sorry, I've gone off that. So let's say I'm going to set that to -1 because 0 means something. 0 is the first option in our array. And so what we can do then is we need to set this when the user clicks on an option. So let's say the user clicks on this div, then we need to set it. And that's where we come to workflows. So workflows are not something we've covered before, but workflows are where you want something to happen in response to something else happening. In this case, it's a user event, which is the onClick event. So if we click on the main div, the main container, and this time if we go over to event, so we can press D, and we get all these events. Toddle basically gives you access to every event that's possible in JavaScript, in general web development, and if one's not listed, if there's an obscure one, you can add it under other. So that's really great, but for this one we won't click. Okay, and what we need to do then is to add an action into this workflow. So we get this little editor here. It doesn't go full screen on us, doesn't disappear everything that's on the screen. We can do that by clicking this little icon at the top to go full screen with the workflow, but this is going to be fairly straightforward, so we won't need to. So when click, I'm just going to click plus to add an action. What I want to do is under variables, I want to set selected. So when they click it, I want to set that selected state, that selected variable. So set that. And now what we need to do is to tell it what to set it to. So I'm going to need a formula for that because it's going to be dynamic. So whenever there's dynamic content needed, it's always a formula in Toddle. So I'm going to click that. And what I actually want is to grab the index of the current item that's been clicked. And Toddle gives us that really easily, simply under repeat, under index. Okay, so we're just selecting the index that the user has clicked on. So if it's 0, then it's going to be dashboard. If it's 1, it orders, 2, products, and so on. And that's all we need to do. We now set the state based on this. So the event is triggered by the user clicking on the event. We then have a workflow behind that sets the value of a variable. Very, very straightforward in there. And then we have a formula that tells it what to set the variable to. Okay, so now what we need to do then is we need to set a state, a color, in the same way as that does, to determine whether or not the selected state applies to the current item, and then to change its color if it is the selected state. So the way that we do that is we're going to go to our div again. Okay, so, and Toddle nicely gives us this to tell us that there is an event on this particular element. So if we go over here, this time we go to attributes. What I want to do, I want to create a style class. And style classes in Toddle are very, very useful because effectively what we're going to say is that when a particular condition is met, i.e. that this option is selected, then we want this element to be styled differently, effectively. But we only want it to be styled differently if that condition is met. And so under classes, we're going to add a new style class, and we're going to call this is selected. So we'll put a little dash between it, is selected. Okay. Now, what we need to do now we created the class, is to say, okay, what is the condition that has to be met for this style to be active? So in other words, we need a formula because it's dynamic. So we're going to say click for the formula. And now what we want to say is the variable that we've just set in the workflow to set which item has been selected is stored in the variable selected. So let's grab that. Okay. And then we need to compare it to the index of the current item in the list. Okay, because we set it to the index of the selected record. So what we're saying is that we want to change the style of this element of the div if the option that they've selected is equal to the current item that we're looking at in the list. Okay, so what we can do then is to say, is the selected, is it equal to, and then we need to say, is it equal to the index, okay, because that's what we're checking against. Okay, so we can see we're checking against selected, does it equal, that's turned into a number, does it equal the current index of the repeat item, which is, again, a number. Now, at the minute, it's returning false. So when we get an output of false, which means that -1 doesn't equal 0, okay, then that's false. That basically means that this style class will not get implemented, will not become active for this particular item. So we set up our style class there. We know it's going to get activated when it's the item that's been selected. So now we need to apply the styles that we want when that style class is active. So the way that we do that is we click plus, and we go to class, And we're going to select is selected. And just like the hover state now, anything that we set with this style class selected is going to apply when it's active in the same way as this applies when it's hovered, etc. So all that we need to do then is come down here and we're going to set the text color to the primary button. And so that should be okay for us to test now. So I'm going to test it in the editor. Okay, and we've got a hover state quite happily there. So let's click this one. Okay, and that goes blue apart from when we hover over it. Okay, but besides that, it's blue. Okay, so we've got a selected state there. So our navigator is looking pretty good now. The only thing we're missing really from our design is our little logo thing. So obviously we don't have a logo, and if you got a logo, you've got it there. So, but let's just put something in that looks like it. So I'm going to create like a div that's a circle, maybe put an icon in between, and we'll just put this text in there. So if you can imagine, we're going to need a row container, one for the div that's going to contain the image, and one for the text. So let's have a look at that. So remember, we've got our logo container here. So I'm just going to drop in a couple of elements. I'm going to put in one more div, and I'm also going to put in a span for the text. We need to make sure that that needs to be a row container. Okay, and we want to make sure it's centered within that. So the span, we probably want something different specifically for this label. So let's make the size to be XL. Okay, I think that's about right. We'll make the weight to be bold. Okay, and we want the text color to be our main primary text color. I think that works out quite nicely. Okay, and then the text itself, we go down to the text label within the span, is going to be, I think it's called Infinita. Okay, and then within this div here then, set that to a certain size. Let's go for 32 by 32. Let's put some gap spacing in between. Let's just check. Yeah, we probably need, say, 12 gap spacing on there. So where are we? 12. Okay, and within this div, we're going to make this round. We're going to make it round by putting a radius of 99, and we're going to make the background color is kind of the blue that we were talking about. So we can make the blue primary button color. We can probably choose a better name for that, but the background is our primary button. Okay, so that's good. So we just kind of need an image now, don't we? That's going to be plonked in the middle of it. I'm not sure what it is. It's kind of like a lightning thing. Let's see if we can find something in Iconify. Now, what I'm going to show you in Iconify, if I actually refresh here, because I probably should, is Iconify suddenly gone away in between starting recording this and now. I've actually changed their interface, which is a little bit annoying to say the least, considering what I've done so far. But anyway, it's just a different layout. It's the same thing. So I'm going to look for lightning. Let's see what we get. What do we think? I think these are kind of more like it, aren't they? So let's look for something that's at least a little bit like it. Doing that one. This one looks the most, doesn't it? That one. So what have we got? What size is that? Is it telling me what size it is? It's 16 by 16. They used to, they do have the size on the, yeah, there we go. 24, probably want, if I can get something closer to 28. No, we're getting 24. Okay, all right. So we'll select that one. That'll do us. And we'll just copy to clipboard. So even I'm just getting used to this because of the fact they've changed it. So back in here, in this div, the one where we draw on the circle, I just want to make sure that I set that so that it's going to put it in the middle. And then I'm then just going to paste that in. Okay, it looks a little bit small, doesn't it? But let's see what we can do. We certainly want the color to be something specific. So we can probably make the text color on that to be a white color, which will then cause the SVG to be the color of its container. Remember, that's on the path here. If we go to attributes, the stroke, or sometimes it's the fill, wherever it says current color, that means that it's going to take the color, the text color from its container. So let's go over here and set that. So let's just set that. We do have, we'll just set it to card BG. I think that's it. We probably needed a fill, didn't we? Rather than, yeah, we needed a fill. Sorry. Right, let's go back. Let's put one in that's filled. So kind of that one. You like it? Is it? It's not quite what I wanted. This one, yeah, this is probably more like it. Let's go for that one. 24 by 24. Copy to clipboard, and we'll just get rid of it. That one, and we'll paste it back in. Okay, and that's kind of looking more like it, isn't it? Looking more like our logo. Not the same, obviously, but still. Can we make this a little bit bigger? Will it deal with it? So with the SVG, you're generally better off. It's set to 1 EM. So let's change that to 24 by 24. Does that make it? That makes it bigger. Okay, and we'll probably need to make the text a bit bigger, won't we? So we go over here. What did we set it to? We set it to, I think it was large. Let's get it onto extra large. Okay. Now it looks like this is more in line with that. So I think we've got too bigger padding at the top. So let's have a look at that. Did I change that? Did I change it to? Let's go for 3XL. Yeah. Okay. So let's say there's a style between these two. So let's say I did 2XL. I don't think it's big enough. 3XL. Where are we? 3XL is too big. Again, what we can do, rather than set a custom size in here, which kind of then means that if we need to change it anywhere else, it's gonna come across a little bit different. Then maybe what we could do is to create another style class for the size in between 2XL and 3XL. We're not going to do that now. I'm just going to set it back to 2XL. But if you remember, when we went into our themes, we set the colors, but we can also do the font sizes, and we can create another size here simply by clicking add another font size variable, and then it's going to be available for us to select. Okay, so I just want to get rid of the padding. We can probably lose a little bit of the size of that as well. So the minute it's set to 50, we can probably set that to 40. So when it centers, it's not too bad, and maybe get rid of some of this padding at the top. At the minute, we've got padding of 24. So let's set that to say 16. Yeah, that's more like it. The font's different. I don't know what font. There is an extension that you can use, a Chrome extension, to pick out the font, but I'm not too worried at this point. We're kind of getting there, aren't we? Yeah, I think we're pretty close to what they've got, I think. Yeah, okay. So the next thing I want to cover is that on this design, we have like a line, a nice little line that's kind of acts as a separator for the nav, and it kind of makes it look a lot nicer than what we've just got at the minute. So if we have a look, I think as well, maybe this one has got the same thing as well, that the header's got a bottom border. So I'm assuming that's the same color as what we've got here, but I'm just going to use my pipette to check. My little color grabber and make sure that we've got the right color. So that's copied it into my clipboard, and back in Toddle, let me just go back to my themes, and yeah, I think I'm going to need a new color, so I'm going to create one. And I'm going to call this border. Yeah, the chances are we're going to need that somewhere else, so we'll have it in there. Okay, so that's F3, F4, F5. No, we don't have that elsewhere, so we'll use that one. Back in our page then, what we need to do on our navigator, I don't know why that's just jumped there. I normally set the size of my page to about 1240. There we go. Just down here, it tells you what the size is. So if I jump here and I go to the nav container, which I think that's a nav, yep, nav container. So what I can do then is to set a border down the right hand side. So if I go over here and go down to border and click plus, I'm now just going to put right. Okay, I'm going to set the color to the border color, and I can set the width of it, but 1 should be enough, I think. Let me try that. Reload. Yeah, I think that's enough. It does go up to the top, doesn't it? Let's just change it to 2 and see if that makes any difference to it. The border, let's set it to 2. Let's have a look on here. We'll leave it at 2. I think that's right. And we can also put it on the header if we want. Let's just leave that there for now. I think we're sort of starting to get some pretty close. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to do is to implement this, which is to collapse the navigator. So generally speaking, when we collapse the navigator, what we want to do is to get rid of everything to the right of this, and maybe we might need to shift it over by reducing the padding. So it depends on how big we want the navigator once it's collapsed. We're going to put some animation on there. We're going to make it sort of float in and float out really nicely. So the first thing we need to do is to implement this, which is our little collapse button. Now, if you notice with this one, it's sat above the line, and also it's neither in this container or this container. So that would suggest that it's not in this one. In other words, it can't be in this one, it can't be in that one. So it has to be floating above both of them. This is something different to what we've done before. Before, we've placed everything what we call relative to each other. So this has been relative to the page, and this has been relative to that, and everything we've drawn has been relative to the next item or to the container that it belongs in. With this one, what we're going to do, we need to position it floating above the line, above the other things we've got on the page, and also it needs to be positioned absolutely rather than relative to anything else. It has to be positioned absolutely on the page. So what we'll do then, we will have a div that's got this circle, and we know how to do that. We've done that several times before now. And yeah, so that's just going to be a div just like everything else. And also we need to set something that's going to float above the page, that it doesn't appear to be sat inside anything else. So let's see how we can do that. So I'm going to go, let's just bring everything in. So we've just got our 2 top containers there. It can't be sat in this one, which is the nav, and it can't be sat in this one, which is the main container. It has to be sat on the page because we want it to float above that, because it doesn't belong to either of these two. So what we're going to do then, we'll create another element, and we will say that this is a div, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to set this differently to how we've done everything else. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to placement. I'm going to set it to be absolute. Okay. Now notice what it's done. It's actually positioned it right in the top left corner. So let's give it a width and a height so we can see it. So it's going to be, let's say it's going to be, well, 32 by 32. We can change it if we need. Okay. Now notice nothing else is moving because of it. Nothing else is shifting around because we've actually set it's absolute on the page. Anything, it doesn't take into account anything else, and nothing takes into account it. So nothing else is moving in relation to it. The one thing you do have to do is that the container that it belongs to does have to be a relative container here. Okay, so what we can do then is let's go and grab our icon that we've got in. Well, before we do that, let's just set its radius to 99, so it's going to be round, and let's put an outline on it, and the outline color, let's say that's the same as the border color. Okay, so we can kind of see what's going on there. and there's also a little bit of a shadow. I don't think we've used shadows before, but there's a little bit of a shadow behind it. So let's just have a look at that. So to add a shadow, click plus. And I think what we'll do, we might just leave it there as it is, because it's already put a little bit of a shadow on there, hasn't it? So if you look, it's transparent at the minute. We probably need a fill color, which is going to be white. So let's set a background color, which is going to be our card BG, our white color. Okay, and that stops that. Okay, so let's leave the shadow as per the default for now, because we can play around with shadows. If we want to get that back, we just got shadow, drop shadow, because you can add multiple drop shadows depending on what the effect that you want. So now we need to position it. It needs to go somewhere. And so what we need to do is to position it sort of on this line. So we want it kind of positioned sort of halfway down the header, and we also want it positioned sort of across the line. So we set the navigator as a width to a fixed width of 220. Okay, so we want it 220, but this is 32. So half of 32 is 16. So what we want to do then is to make it 16 smaller than this. So effectively, that's going to be 204. And the idea then is that's where it's positioned on the left. So it'll be halfway across the line, effectively. So if my maths are correct, which they rarely are, let's try that. So we've got absolute now. What's the position from the left? This is going to be, I worked out to be 204. Well, that worked out quite nicely. And then the header is kind of, I think we set the header to 60. Yep, we set it to 60. So it's 32, so that's 28. Out of 28 is 14. So therefore, the top position will be 14. Okay, and we're probably going to need to shift this over. What's the padding on there to give us a slight shift across? Let me look. We've got 16 pixels. We're probably going to need much more than that. So let's send that over to 24, and we'll need to do the same on this container, because we did that. There we go. And that one needs to be 24 as well, so they're all spaced the same. There's another way we can do that, by the way, that I should have done before, but we can go back and look at that again. Okay, so we kind of got it halfway as we need it. So let's just have a look at that, how that looks on our page. That still looks too close, doesn't it? Let me have a look. It still looks way too close. Let's have a look at that again. Probably need to set that to 30. Okay, maybe even 36. We'll leave it at 36, and we'll change our main container to be the same. I'm not sure I'm happy with that amount of space, but maybe we can set that one to say 24, something like that. Okay, but that's fine at the minute. Let's reload that, and yeah, that's better. So, okay, it's actually a much smaller thing, isn't it? And the header is obviously much bigger. Maybe 32 by 32 was too big. Maybe 28 would have done it. What do you think? I think the header needs to be a little bit bigger as well, but we'll leave that there for now. So, yeah, this is just part and parcel what we need to do. So let's go for 26, actually. 26 by 26. It means we're going to need to recalculate our positioning, which is a little bit annoying, but there we go. So effectively, we've took 10 off it, so we're going to need to add 5. So that's 209 and 209. That's right. And this is going to be 19 from the top. I think that's right. That doesn't look quite right, does it? Let's have a look on the page. Reload. No, that is not right. So let me recalculate my maths again. Okay. So we've got 220 from the left. Okay. And the size of it is 26. So half of 26 is 13. And so therefore we want it to be 220 minus 13, which is 207. That moved over a little bit. Will it be enough? Who knows? It will do. It will do us for now. So the other thing as well, it is floating above the page, so that's a good thing. But just to make absolutely sure, when you want to float something above the page, the standard content on the page, you use what we call a Z index, which is not as complex as it sounds. All it means is, if you're looking at, think of your page, you know, we've got width and height of everything, but Z index is kind of like depth. So if you imagine that what's sat on the page is at Z index 0, and if you want it to anything to be placed above the page, in other words, kind of like popping out of the screen nearer to the user, then you set a higher Z index. So the higher the Z index, the nearer to the user and the further away from the main content on the page is. So what we can do then is go to placement, and we can set a Z index of, I'm just going to set it of 2, because we just don't need it to be that high. As long as it's above 0, which is where the rest of the page is, then that's fine. Okay, now we just need to grab ourselves an icon. So let's go back, and this is kind of a chevron, I would say. Let's see what we get. So we want a left chevron, so any of these will do really, as long as they're 24. If we can get 20, that'd be better, wouldn't it? I think 20, well, 24. Okay, we'll live with 24 if we need to. That's 32. 24 by 24. Can we get a 20? There's a 15. No, that's a 24. 21 by 21. Let's grab that one. So we'll copy that to clipboard, and we will then, in our collapse nav div, we will then paste that in. Okay, we obviously need that to be centered. Why is it set to such a small size? Let's have a look. Attributes on the SVG. Let's get to 1 EM again. So what did we say? 21 by 21. Is that reasonable, do you think? I think that's fairly reasonable. Let's have a look. No, it's bigger on there. So why don't we then just increase the size of it to say, we should have grabbed the 24, shouldn't we? Let's face it. Yeah, but I think that's okay. I think that will do us. What do you say? I'm happy enough with that. Okay, so we've now got that set. Okay, so now let's see how we can put this collapse option into action. So if you remember before, we had an event when the user clicks an option in the navigator. And if you remember, what happened when we did that is in our option here, we had our little event, and it was on our click event over here. And then we had a workflow that got executed in response to that click event. So we're going to do exactly the same thing here. So we're going to go to our div, our little collapse circle div, and then we're going to go to events, and then we're going to say to respond to the click event. So what we need to do then is to have some state that determines if the navigator has been collapsed or it hasn't been collapsed. So when we need state, which effectively means a dynamic data, we need a variable. So let's go and do that now. So we'll click anywhere off the canvas or press escape, and we'll go to variables, and we will add a variable, and we will call this collapsed. Okay, and then initially this is going to be a Boolean value, which means that it can either be true or false. So in other words, it either is collapsed or it isn't collapsed. And if it's collapsed, then it'll be true. If it isn't collapsed, then it will be false. So we want to start it off at the state of false, so it isn't collapsed. So we'll put that in there. And what happens with Toddle is that it infers the type that you want. And the fact that it's in quotes indicates that it thinks it's a string or a piece of text, which it isn't. We need it to be a Boolean value. So the way that we set that statically is we come into our formula editor, and we have the option to just have a static value of false. And that's all that we need there to set our initial value for our collapsed variable. So now we can go back to our div and into our events, to our click event. We can now set an action to set collapsed. Okay, and again, we're going to we need to set it dynamically. So we're going to click the effects for the formula editor. Okay, so I'm just going to get rid of that. So what we could do is just simply to say that collapsed is true. So we set it as an initial value of false. We could just set it to a static value of true. Okay, but what we really want with this is for it to be a toggle. So we want them to be able to press the button to collapse it if it's uncollapsed or decollapsed. I'm not sure what the phrase is, the correct word is. But if it is collapsed and they click it, we want it to decollapse, shall we say. So we need to act as a toggle rather than just set it to true all of the time. So the way we do that is we come down and we set that we want the collapsed variable. And we're going to then use a formula called not. So not is a formula that works on the Boolean values and it effectively reverses whatever the value is. So if it's false, run it through not, it becomes true. If it was true, we run it through not, it becomes false. So it acts like a toggle. So the initial state of collapse will be false. Run it through here, it's going to then be true. And then if they click it again, then it's going to be false because we're toggling that value. So we're setting that there. So that's as much as we need in terms of the workflow and the action. However, we need a little bit more to respond to that state in our navigator. So the first thing we need to do is to look at it and say, well, we don't need the padding down the side because what we really want to do is to collapse it to a certain size and then just center it in the middle. But primarily what we want to do is to make it a smaller size. That's first and foremost what we need to do. So if we click on here on the navigator div, let's just close everything up. And what we need to do is similar to what we said before was whenever they click on one of these, a certain state changes, and then we need a style class that's going to react to style that element differently depending on what the state is. So if we look at our navigator here and we go to styling, we can see that the width of it is set to a static width of 220. So let's say that when they collapse it, we want that to be a static width of 60. But the point is that the width is in under styles. So therefore, we can have a style class that when active will change this width from 220 to, let's say, 60. And it works in exactly the same way as we had before. Before we were just changing the text color. Now we're going to change the width of the element. So we're going to go to attributes. We're going to create a class and we're going to call it collapsed. Okay, into the formula editor. Remember to determine, this determines a condition of whether if it's true, that means that this style class is going to be active. If it's false, then it's not going to be active. So we're just going to set it to the value of collapsed, which is either true or false. So if it's true, that means they have collapsed it. Then we want this style class to be active. And then we set the value in here. And then what we're going to do then is we're then going to set its width to be 60 pixels. So in other words, it automatically is going to collapse. Now, what Toddle does here is we click on these styles. So we click default and then we go to collapsed. You can see it actually shows it for us. So we can kind of get an idea of what it's going to look like. Now, obviously, we're not doing anything in here yet. That's something that we need to do next. But it gives you a clue about what it's going to do. So under the collapse state, what we also want to do is to actually center everything in here. So if we look at the default, what we've got is everything's positioned to the top right. And we've also got some padding down the left and the right hand side. So what we want to do is we want to get rid of that padding so there's no space, and then we want to center it so that we just get it centered without us having to control the padding separately. So all we're going to do then is click on the collapsed style. We're going to set the padding to 0, which we do have to set it specifically, and then I'm going to center these. Okay, so we can see that we do have some reaction to that at the minute, so that's working quite nicely, but we've still got a few things to do yet. So What we're also going to need to do is to remove the labels if it's in a collapsed state. So the next step then is what we're going to do about these, because that's not what we want at all, is it? So what are we going to do about those? So I'd suggest we just get rid of them in a collapsed state, because there's no good way of handling that, because the only way to get them to fit in, and we wouldn't get the sales channel to fit in, is to reduce the font. We don't want that. There's no good way to deal with this. Maybe put M and then an SC or something, but I don't think it's really relevant. So let's just collapse them completely if we're in a collapsed state. So if we go into the navigator and we're here this is the span that does it. So what we're going to do, we're going to click on that and we're going to do exactly the same thing. So we're going to go over to attributes and we're going to say classes. I'm going to call this collapsed. Okay, and again, we're just relying on the collapsed variable. And styling, we're going to add a style. It's going to be the collapsed state. Okay, and then what we're going to say is that under here layout, we're going to say none. So in other words, we don't want it to display. So let's just select that. So now what we should see then, if we go to that, we can see it's disappeared. Okay, don't worry about the sales channel, because it's in a repeater. When we run it, it will work. So actually we'll do that now. So if we click to play and we go to collapse it, okay, we can see that they are removed. We've got a little bit of work to do yet, but we can see that they are removed quite happily from there. Okay, and then we click it again because we toggled it. We can see that we do get it back. So now what we're going to do, we're going to get rid of the labels, make sure that they're not in the way or being displayed in any way, shape or form. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go over here, create a collapsed class. Collapsed, no, that's wrong. Okay, and again, just rely on the output of the variable, and we will go here and we will say collapsed. None again. So again, we can test this out. Yeah, we can, because it's on a repeat, it doesn't get rid of all of them, but it gets rid of the first one. So obviously when we run that, we're running in the editor for now, we should see that they all go. Yep, they all go. One more step to do to make this look reasonable yet is to do the same thing on these options at the bottom. So we need to come here and then we need to say exactly the same thing. Let's create a style class called collapsed. Okay, and just relying on the collapse variable, and in styling then add a new style based on the collapse variable, and we want to say none. Okay, so now let's just test that. Okay, and we should start to see something looking more like it. So obviously we've got the logo to deal with, where we do exactly the same thing, is to come up here to our span where we've got our logo text, and we just do exactly the same thing in here, is to collapsed and just add the collapse class and set it to none. Okay, how does that go? Again, run it in the editor. Nice, we're kind of getting there, aren't we? Okay, we've got nicely centered there. They do shift upwards because we're removing the menu and the sales channel, but I don't think it's getting in the way at all. Okay, so obviously we do want this little button to move to the other side now, don't we? Because we don't want it left there. We want it kind of to shift across. And we also want like the chevron to change to point to the right rather than to the left. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is to shift the position of this. So let's go into edit mode there, and the shift position is going to, because it's 60 wide, the new navigator when it's collapsed, and this was, what did we say this was? Let me shift everything up. Well, there is 26 by 26, so over that is 13. So take 13 away from 60, and I believe, sorry, did I say 13 away from 60? Yeah, then you get 47. Okay, so we need this position at 47. So again, we need the style class for this one as well. So go to attributes and set a class of collapsed. Okay, and set the state to collapsed. Okay, and then we will pick our class. Okay, and then the position, the left-hand side is then going to be, I said 47, didn't I? Okay, so let's just check that. So if we click it, yeah, you can see where it's going to be positioned. Okay, that's fine. Let's give that a go. Yeah, so it moves over. Doesn't particularly work. It's a little bit close to that, isn't it? It's probably too big, but let's not get diverted. We're already over 2.5 hours into this video. Let's not focus on too much detail while we still got so much to cover. Okay, but you can see that now is our kind of our collapse navigator. We can see that everything else is flexing quite nicely, so that's working well. Okay, so one thing I do want to cover, however, is animation. I want to make this a little bit nice for you. Actually, before we do that, I haven't got the right chevron in there, so that was the other one that we used. So let's see if, let's just check if we can do right. Okay, this is it. So it's 21. I don't know whether we'll get the equivalent. I should have made a note, shouldn't I? 21. Right, we have the perfect one. Okay, sometimes things just work out. Let's go back into edit mode. So what I want to do with this one, let's close everything up again other than this one, is I'm actually going to paste this in. So I'm going to Control V. So you don't want both, obviously. So we want this one only when it's collapsed. So what we can do is the same thing if we wanted to. We can do one or two things here. We can either do the show hide or we can do the style class. So the style class is maybe one more step involved. So let's do the show hide. There is a difference, by the way, between using show hide and using the style class to set the visibility of an element to none. There is a difference, but I won't cover that in here. This will probably suit our purpose. So collapsed. Okay. So that one, I want that to be visible when it's not collapsed. Okay, because that's the left hand chevron. And with this one, I want to show hide if if it is collapsed. Okay, so you'll only get one at a time. So let me go through that again. We've got two two images, SVGs, one pointing to the left, one pointing to the right. If it's actually, I need to set the size on that one, don't I? Let's have a look. Yeah. Okay, I think I set it to, was it 22? Yeah, that seems reasonable, I think. So the idea then is that we've got two icons, two SVGs, one pointing to the left, one pointing to the right. If it's not collapsed, then we want the one pointing to the left to be visible. If it is collapsed, we want the one pointing to the right to be visible. So therefore, what I've done is created a show hide condition formula that says that if it's not collapsed, then the one to the left is visible. And if it is collapsed, the one to the right is visible. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So we'll test it fully now in the here. Okay, so yeah, that's quite nice. Okay, the difference is it's a little bit. There's no elegance to it. There's no animation. So let's cover animations in here. So we're going to start with our main nav bar because that's shifting from a 220 width to a 60 pixel width. So what we want to do then is in the default, with the default style clicked, if we scroll down, okay, we then get this animation option. So I'm going to add an animation. And the transition is how do I want the transition to be and what property do I want it to be based on. So I want it to be based on when the width adjusts. So I'll drop this down and I should see an option for width. There we go. Okay. And so let's say I want the duration to be, this is in milliseconds, by the way. So 160 milliseconds. Let's say I want a delay of say 60. That's the number of milliseconds between when the animation starts and when it actually starts to display. Okay, linear, we get different options. Okay, let's just stick with linear for now and just show you how this works. So if I now refresh here, okay, and I click to do this, we can see that it very nicely, okay, just animates. Now only animates at the minute, it only animates the width of it. It's not animating anything else, so maybe we might need to look at that. But first, let's have a look at animating this, because this kind of this shifts across faster than it actually animates, which makes it look a bit weird. So let's have a look at that one. So the position with that one is based on its left position. Again, we'll show you that. If we look in here, when we collapse this, it's an adjustment to its absolute left position. So nothing else changes other than its left position. So that's what we need to animate on this one. So we'll go to default and we'll go down to animation and we will add a transition. So the property we want this time is actually its left. Okay, so there we go. We can select that. We'll do the same thing because we want to move it at the same speed as the other one. So I think I set that to 160 and 60. Let me make sure. Yeah, 160 and 60. So that now is going to effectively animate at the same pace as we move the width of the navigation bar. Okay, so it's going to look very smooth. So let's do that. Reload. Okay, and nice. Yeah, okay, now we don't know what it looks like in the final thing. Yeah, that's a little bit iffy the way it's kind of very close, but still it does the job for us. Now we can say that, well, this stuff is jumping about a little bit. We don't necessarily like this, but you know, you can really go to town on animating all of the different elements. To be honest with you, for us, for right now, that's pretty cool, I think. That's pretty good. Let's move on, okay? Because we're a long way into this, and I've still got so much I want to show of Toddle in terms of getting this right. So next thing that I want to show you is working with URLs, okay? And the reason I want to show you this is because when we were doing the selection of the navigation options, what we were doing, we were setting a variable, okay? And that's kind of an internal state to the app, which means that when you refresh, so if I've got the customer selected, okay, and I reload, that option isn't selected. There's no way to go back to it, okay? So the way that we do it using something that we can call routing, and again, we kind of touched on this when we were doing the navigation options, but we didn't obviously implement it. So let's say that I would love to have it where I can put in the URL, let's say, where are we, products, okay, and then it would know which options to go to. So you could pass a URL around and it would go straight to the option that you wanted to look for in the application. Again, I'm coming from the point of view of a single page app rather than a multi-page app. So this is something to consider. And the other thing as well, it also builds a history. So you can kind of use the browser's back and forward button to navigate to bits in your app, based on the fact that it's a different URL and the browser keeps a track of that URL. Okay, now if I was to do that now, it probably would actually not work. No, it doesn't. We get a 404. So let's try and implement that into our application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the canvas, press escape, and we've got this option for page where we can set up things at the page level. So I'm going to click this. Okay, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a path. So the default path is a path to our page name, which is app. And I'm going to say I'm going to add a path. Okay, and I'm going to call this view. Okay, and what's important is that I tick this param, because otherwise Toddle sees this as a static URL to the page. I don't want that. I want us to be able to move it around within the application and change it. So I'm going to then click param. Okay, and just as a test, I'm going to say dashboard. Okay, just while I'm testing it in the editor. So I'm done with that. Now that's set up. So what happens then is when I'm in a formula, so let's say one of these, just let me show you this for demonstration. I now get that parameter, so that's now available to me everywhere that I need to use it. Okay, so what I'm going to do then, rather than us base it on an internal variable that kind of goes out of memory, I'm actually going to not use this selected option. Instead, I'm going to base it on the URL. So what I need to do then is to adjust our original nav options array to deal with this. So in other words, each option in the array needs to know which URL it kind of lights up for. So in other words, a URL that says dashboard will select the dashboard option. Dash orders will select the orders option. So let's go into our formula here. Let's scroll to the top, and do you remember route, whichever way you want to say it. So I'm going to say that that's dashboard. This is going to be orders. Okay, and products. Now I could have just made it like the lowercase of the label, but you know, sometimes there may be something different that you want in there. Okay. Okay. Integrations. Okay, and which one's this? Again, you see, I wouldn't want the space in there, so that's maybe where it's a good idea to have a separate one. I knew there was a reason. So discounts, okay, settings, okay, and get help. I think there's one last one for us, and that is log out. Okay. So what I'm going to do then, we're going to then change. Do you remember that we had on a navigator, we had a style class on our div here to determine that it went blue if it was selected. You remember we called it is selected. So if we go to that now and is selected, we can see it's based on the selected class, and we're using an index and all of this type of thing. So I'm actually going to get rid of these two anyway. Okay, and what I actually want to do now is to rely on the URL instead. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to say that if the view, which is the URL parameter, in other words, the slash that we put in here, so in here the slash product, slash orders, etc. So I'm going to select the view. I'm going to say if that equals 2, and then I can say the items route or route, whichever. Okay, so we set a test value of dashboard. So what's happened then is it's highlighted the dashboard there. So what we need to do is that when they click the options, rather than set that variable, because if we go to this event here where we can click on an option, we had an on click event with a workflow that set that variable. We don't need to do that now. What we can do is to add a different action to this, okay? And we can see that we get on the URL set view. So that now we can click on that, and we can actually get rid of that one. And in our formula then, all we need to do is to set it to the item, which is the item that is currently iterating in that repeat, to its route/route. Okay, so what we're doing then is we're saying when you click on the option, change the URL of the in the address bar, and then we're then looking for that URL to determine which option gets selected. So it's a different way of doing it, but it's a little bit more flexible in terms of what we can do in our app. So let's refresh this. Okay, now we get an undefined there, which we can deal with separately. But as we click our options, you look at the URL and you look at the state. So everything now is revolving around the URL. We're setting the URL when we click an option rather than a variable, and we're using it to set the state or the style of each option that we pick. Okay, so that's a much better way of doing it. Now, if we go back, we can see now that we're actually navigating through the options that we selected. Okay, so that's much nicer way of doing it. Also, if I was to, let's say, copy this and open it in another page, we can jump straight to the orders option there. So it's just a much nicer way of doing it, and it's absolutely key that you get to understand things like URLs in and developing it in Toddle as well. So what we could also do now is to actually change this at the top to rather being static text to be relying on the option that's selected. And again, we're not relying on the element, we're not relying on a variable, we're relying on the URL to tell us that. So if we go up here to where we have analytics rather than a static text, I'm going to click the formula. Okay, now what we need to do here, because in here we're not inside a repeat, okay, so we kind of have to look at it a little bit differently in this one. So what we need to do is we need to point to our array, our nav options, and I think what we want to do, we want to display the option that's currently selected via the URL and display the label of that. Okay, so we've got a list of nav options here. So you imagine what we want to do is to find the option in our array that corresponds to the current URL of the page. The keyword that I used there was find, because there is a formula called find in Toddle. So we say find, and the first input it accepts is an array, which we've obviously given it. And now, do you remember the filter option that we used before to filter our navigation options? Well, find is very similar, apart from we're just looking for one thing, and once it's found it, then it's done. But it works on the same principle, is that we give it a sub-formula from this input here that tests the value to see if this is the item that we want. So what we're going to do is we say what we want is if the root of this item that is looping through, okay, is going to be equal to the URL of our view. Okay, so all of that does is find it, so that will output this option here. So it's found the object that we want, which is our dashboard option, but we just want to have the label output from it. So then what we can do is to use what we call the get formula. Now the get formula is to pull a value, a specific value out of an object. So all we need to do there is to say the label. Okay, so we can see what's going on with that is that we get the output that we want. So let's go through that again. We've got a list of options. We need to find the option which has the route property here that is equal to what the current value of the view is. So in other words, what's the current setting up here in our URL, okay? And then when it's found it, okay, then it needs to get the value from a property called label, which we've put there. So as you can see, where we go to item, we can see that we got label icon route or route group. So we say label. Okay, sorry, that's not what we wanted. We wanted route in that one, didn't we? So it's going to find the option in our array that equals to whatever's in the URL, that property in the URL. Okay, and then when we found it, then it's going to grab the label property out of it, and then it's going to give us that. And then that's going to display in our label up here. So let's give that a go. So notice as well, we're on orders now. So if we refresh it, we'll get that one. So we can see there we've got orders, and then as we click through, we then get our different options on here. Okay, now we need to do something extra with those ones because we're not dealing with it as it stands at the minute, but at the moment that kind of does the job. So, and again, we can go back and we can look at previous options. It's just a much better way of doing it than just holding state, especially for if you're building out single page apps as well. So back in the editor, a little bit of housekeeping. I noticed that in the nav options, I hadn't actually set, I think it's for analytics, wasn't it? I hadn't actually set a route. There we go. Okay. The other thing, of course, is that we haven't actually dealt with these bottom options here. So remember they were in a different, where are we? Okay, yeah. Remember they were in a different span, in a different repeat. So we kind of have to deal with these a little bit separately. So what we'll do is on the div here, that's it, yeah. And then what we'll just go to a click event and we will do the same thing, which is to set the view to the items route. Okay, and then everything will be taken care of from there, I believe. Let's give that a go just to make sure. Okay, yeah, that works. We still haven't got the state of the selected state. Obviously, that's something that we need to sort out, but it's just exactly the same as what we did here, so that's absolutely fine. Make sure analytics works. Yeah, okay. So what I want to do now is to have a look at our analytics page that we've got from our template. So in our analytics page, we have these different sections now. We haven't got the time in this video because I don't want to go 6 hours into doing line charts and things like this. Maybe that's for another video, but I do want to get the general layout so that at least you get some idea of how we can lay this out. So we obviously only want this to be displayed when the analytics section is selected. So the way that we do that is using the show hide, or obviously we could use a style class, but in this case we'll use show hide. That's the most convenient way to do it. So in here, what we will do is let's close everything up so that we've got an easier way to set things. So what we've got is our nav, we've got our main, and within our main, we've got our header, and then we've got our main section that we haven't touched yet. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to create another div inside this div. So this is the overall container, but we need different divs in there that represent the different sections of our application. So I'm going to create another div in there. Okay, and let me name that so that we know. Let's keep into the habit of this, even though I know I've let that slip a little bit. And so this is our analytics. If I can spell. Okay, and I'm going to call this section. So in our div here, I will make that flex so that we get it all the way down. That's fine. And we do want it to be a column container because if we look at our layout here, the general gist of this is that there's a row, there's a row, there's a row, they're stacked on top of each other. So that in itself is going to be a column container, the main container. And then we've got this section here, which is obviously going to be a row container. In fact, they're all going to be row containers from there on. So the main container for our analytics section will be a column container, and then all of its subsidiary divs will be row containers. Okay, so by default we get it as row, so that's all great. So our next one then is going to be a row container. And obviously we've got some gap spacing at the top there that obviously doesn't want to fit to the top. But probably what we'll do, we'll put that gap actually in the main container rather than outside. So if we go back here to our main content container, is we'll put some padding at the top as well as the left and right. So we'll do the same thing. We'll do 24. Is that too much? No, that seems about right actually. Seems about right, yeah. Okay, and then this one, the height of it's probably, I'd say about 40. I'm always wrong when I guess, but you got to start somewhere. So with this one, I'm going to say the height of this, sorry, not that one. The first one, the height is going to be 40 pixels. And what I want to do now then is with here. This is obviously going to be similar to what we had in the header. We're going to spread this across. So we're going to have a left-hand container that's going to have this date thing, and then a right container is going to have these two buttons. So let's do that. So we're just going to click there. Okay, it's going to spread. So then we're going to need another div inside this. Okay, and let's say that's going to be, the width of that one is going to be, let's say, so I'm on the wrong one, I need a new one. Right, okay. So we'll set the height to be 100% of its container, and its width, let's say, is going to be 120 pixels. Probably needs to be more than that. Okay, and probably even bigger than that, actually. Anyway, so I'm only just putting some space so that we can see at the minute. So I'm just going to drag this one down. Sorry, I pressed Command and I needed to press Option, or Alt if you're on a PC. Okay, so we can see that spread across. Now, that's got to be much longer, but it also needs to be a row container because obviously the buttons are side by side. Okay, so this one here, let's focus on this one. We obviously want it to have a white background, so we've set the color already in our themes. Let's just set that one to be our card background color. With that one, why are we not? Oh, right, okay, so that's the text color. Clear, let's go to our background color. Okay, and our radius, we'll set that to be 12. It might be too big, that, so let's set it to 8 pixels. That's about right, isn't it? Do we have any border or anything on that? No, we don't. So let's have a look. Okay, so the contents in that, we want that to be vertically centered, just to make sure everything appears in the middle. We are probably going to need it wider than that, but we'll size it to its content ultimately. So 200. We also want some padding on the left and the right. Okay, so let's say I'm going to set that to be 18 pixels. Again, I kind of guessing when I'm doing this, the real way to do it is to set them up in your themes, as we did with colors, and keep to standardized padding and all of that type of thing. Okay, so now we've got that in there. Let's focus on this. So this one has two buttons in there. So if we have a look at what they've got one with an image and one without an image. So I tend to not use buttons. I tend to just use divs. It keeps things a bit more uniform. There's not really a great deal of difference between a button and using a div, to be honest. They all have the same click events. They all have the same hover effects, all of that type of thing. If somebody can outline the benefit of using a button as opposed to using just a div, then you can enlighten me, but it's not something that I do. So we're going to need a refresh icon in there as well. So let's put two buttons on there in any case. So which are going to be div. So I'm going to do 8 and then div. Okay, and I'm going to drag a new one down as well. There we go. Okay, and I'm going to make them, so this one is 100% of its container. Let me have a look. So they're not contained with anything, so they can be 100% as well, 100% height, both of those. So, okay, and the same with that one. Okay, so in here I'm going to add an SVG. So let's go over to our iconify and let's go and search for a refresh icon. Okay, we just need something that's about 24 that looks something similar to what we've got. I kind of like that one. Is that okay? 24. Yeah, that will do. Copy to clipboard, back in there. Let's paste that in. Okay, and it's probably done its usual thing with the sizing. Sorry, go back to the SVG, which is change it to 1M. So let's put it at 24 by 24. Okay, that's more like it. The color is the color is more like the secondary color, isn't it, that we picked? So we'll set the div here to be have a text color of the secondary color, and that will change the color of the icon. Okay, and then we obviously want to give the icon the background, which is different than the other thing. No, it's not, it's white. Okay, that's fine. So we'll set that to have a background color of the card. Okay, and we want that to have a width of, well, we will leave it because we can size it to the content. So what we will do with this one on the div is we will get some padding left and right. We'll center it first and foremost, and we'll put some padding of, let's say, 12 pixels either side. Okay, and then we need to add a span. Okay, all of this should start to get pretty familiar with what we've done before. Now, obviously, the button, this div needs to be a row container. It needs to be side by side. We want some gap spacing so that we've got gap between the different ones. Let's go for 8 pixels. That's fine. The text probably doesn't need to be that big, so let's see how we've got this set. So where are we? So that's the main container, and this is our container here. So we'll set the size as high up the tree as we can. Let's see if we've got anything here. Oh, we've set things, we just set it to primary text. I'm going to set the size to be font size small, okay, and then that changes that. And that way, it's best to set them as high in the tree as possible, and then if you need to go lower down, you can. Just saves you setting everything in one place. So let's set the text on that span to be refresh, and it should resize itself. It should. We need a rounded button, so we'll put our same radius on there as well. So let's have a look. We need the radius of, let's say, 12 pixels. We're looking, is that too much? Yeah, I think we set it to 8 actually. We standardized on 8, I think. So we'll go for 8 pixels. All good. Okay, so I'm going to actually copy that one. So we've already got one there, so I'm going to just delete that one because this one's all ready to go. Obviously, we don't need the SVG in this one, but let's go with this one. So let's get rid of the SVG in this. We need some gap spacing because the buttons are too close together. So we'll go for 18 pixels gap spacing. Okay, so we've obviously sized this div to be 160, so I'm going to let that go now, and that way it will size to the content. So what I'm going to do there is the text is going to be, what did we set the text to? Create campaign. Okay, so we can do that. Okay, and obviously the background is going to be our blue color, which we set to be, was this primary button, wasn't it? Okay, the text has to change to be a white color. Rather than secondary text, we'll change that to content BG. We could actually have that as another color, as our kind of our background text color, which we should really do, but I just want to set it to white for now. So tell you what, we'll go for content background color, and that's as near as damn it. Okay, so let's have a look how we're doing at this point. Okay, are we doing okay? Yeah, I think so. I think we're doing okay. Yeah, all right. So with this one, we just need to put some text in there just to make it look something similar. It's just, we need a calendar icon. Okay, we don't necessarily need to do this, but let's, for bottom braces, I mean, why not? We've been going for hours. Let's keep going. As Winston Churchill once said, if you're going through hell, keep going. Which hopefully this isn't hell, but there you go. So what does it look like now? So it's kind of, yeah. Right, we see something like this anyway. So is it? Sorry, I'm jumping back and forward there. Yeah, it's something like one of these. So we need 24. Okay, I kind of like these ones here, but anyway, I don't want to waste too much time. He says, so copy to clipboard, and in let's close it up. Yeah, in this one, we will paste that in, and we will make sure that we set the size of our SVG in attributes to be 24 by 24. Okay, it's probably a little bit too big, isn't it, for what they've got still? Actually, no, if you zoom in, it's not really. And then just a date, so we can put some random date in there. So we're then going to need, this needs to be a row container, doesn't it? Because everything's going to be side by side. So let's go to styling, change it to a row container, and let's put some gap spacing of 12 pixels. Okay, let me make sure with that one, we set that to 8 pixels in there. So let's do 8. Okay, and then we're then going to add a span. Okay, and sorry if I'm going pretty quick, but I think we've covered most of this. So in the span, we simply just put an address, sorry, not an address, a date. So I'm just going to say what format have they got. Okay, let's go July 2023 to July 31, 2023. Okay, and again, we need to just get the fixed width, which I just set initially, and then it will size to its content. Okay, and I think we're looking pretty good on that one. So, okay, so the next one now is to do these ones. There's a fairly big gap between them, so we need to set our gap spacing. So probably what we can do then is we can probably use the same principle of space between, but just space these differently, and it will give it the opportunity. So each one can be, we don't need them to be 33% of its container, because we need the gaps in between, which will automatically get from Flexbox when we set the sizes. So we set these each to say 30%, and we'll spread it across, and then that will give us our answer that we need. So we need to go on into this one. So let's set with this one some gap spacing as well. We need 24 pixels. So I will now do another div. Okay, and this again has got to be a row container. Where are we? It's set that to there. Sorry, I've put it at the wrong level, have I? What's that one? Yeah, it needs to be inside this one. Sorry, I've put it at the wrong place, so I'll put that one back up the top. Okay, there we go, that one. So yeah, it's this one. I need to set some gap spacing of, let's say, 24 pixels, because otherwise it's going to be too close. So again, so that's going to be the overall container, which is a row. Now I need the 3 containers that are going to be placed in there. So the size of that is probably going to be I'd say it's about 100, something of that nature. So let's give that a go. So we will size that to be 100 pixels. It's probably bigger than that, isn't it? It's more like sort of 160 something. That's more like it. And then 3 more divs. Okay, and I'll just copy these down. Okay, actually, I'm better off setting one and then doing that. So with this one, again, I'm going to set it to spread. And then these ones are going to be, the width is going to be 30% and 30% and 30%. Okay, so that looks good there. I just need to give them some height. So let's set them to 100% height. There we go. 100% height and 100% height. And if I just set the background of white, this is why I said I should have just done one and copied it really. Okay, again, I've set the text color instead. My bad. Okay, so background and then border. Where are we? Background, set it to the card. and the same with that one as well, card BG. That seems to do the job. So let's set the radius of each one to be 8, which is our standard one. Again, I'm having to repeat this because I should have just got one right and then copied them down once they were done, but I'm trying to get stuff done. So if we have a look at that in the app, reload that, that's going to make them pretty big across, but they look pretty good. Yeah, so I'm just going to put these headers on there for now, just to see. And so we'll put some padding all the way around. They've got some hefty padding there, top left. Yeah, okay, so we will put some hefty padding on there, top and bottom of 24. Okay, and we'll need to add a container, another div in there that's going to have our content. So what we've got there is we'll need a row container. So it'll contain this on the left and this on the right. So we will, okay, and this one's going to be a row container. Okay, probably set that back to the top left because we've added padding. And so with this one, this again can be 100% width, and we can set its height. For now, we can set it to say 40, but we'll probably let it go with its content. So that's going to contain our tag and, sorry, our label and this icon. So we need one on the left, one on the right. So again, in here, we're going to need to put 2 more divs. Okay, and let's just drag that one down. Okay, so this one, we've already set it to a row container. So this one is going to contain a span. Okay, so we could have just had the span and not the div, but I prefer to put things in divs when we can. So that div, we can center it. Okay, and well, I don't think we need to actually. So what we can do there is to set it. So what's the text? Is online sessions. Okay, and this is definitely primary text. So let's see how far we can go up to get the text in our tree. I think that is the primary text, isn't it? Okay, let's see. So if I set it directly on the span, I set it to be primary text. Yeah, I think it is primary text, so I will just let that be inherit. Okay, and all good. So what we can do then is to get rid of the, where are we? I think it's on this div. We can get rid of the height. We just want it set to its content really. Okay, it probably needs to be bigger text. So we'll set that on the span, and we will set the size of that one to be, let's say, large. That's good enough, I think. Okay, and then we just need we've got this div here that's going to be on the right. Is that correct? So we've got our, yeah, okay. So that's yeah, we didn't set it to spread so that we get one on the left, one on the right. So now what we can do is, let's go and grab like it was like full screen or something. Yeah, that will do. So one of these is 24. Yeah. Okay. Copy to the clipboard, and we will paste it into this one. Okay. We obviously need to set it to the right size, which is 24 by 24 by 24. Okay, is there anything else we need? Yep, that's a secondary color. So we need to set its container to have a text color of secondary. So it's different color. Right, this probably does need to be centered. So let's do that one. Yeah, okay, I'm happy enough with that. So let's take a look at how that looks on the page. Okay, the icon needs to probably be bigger, but we won't worry too much. Okay, So we can now just put the labels in there that we want to do. So let's do that quickly. So what we need then, so this is there. So we need probably some gap spacing between the different elements. So this is our general container. So we need a gap spacing, let's say of let's say 18 pixels. Okay, so when we go, sorry, we're on this one, and then that's the first section. Okay, and then that contains all of those things. So okay, so I'm going to just copy that one down. Okay, and what we will do is just add our big number in there as a label. So we're on this one. There's the span. Let's make, obviously this is going to be quite big, so let's make this one 3XL. Do we have anything on the side of it? Oh, we would have that obviously, but we don't have it. So what we can, I tell you what, we'll just change it to 2XL, and we can change that to be, what's the figure on there? 2996. 2996. Okay, it probably does need to be bigger than that, but you get the gist. Okay, we don't need that icon on the left hand side. We probably can have the text bigger actually. It just looks bigger in the editor, but, and again, we're not really dealing with responsiveness here, so we can probably then get rid of the SVG in there. Reload. I'm going to leave that for now because because we've got to grab another icon and all of that sort of stuff. So what I will do, I will get rid of these two here. Just get rid of them, and then I will copy this one down. So let's just do that. Okay, close it up and copy that one as well. Okay, and then we can change these to obviously orders for marketing costs, so we can do that. But what you can actually do is to double click on the label. You don't necessarily have to go to the text and do it. So just to show that, which one was that? Orders for marketing. Okay, and let's get rid of. Okay, and what was the other one? The other one was marketing cost. Okay. Okay, and 3026. 3026, and let's just make a figure up. 3782. Okay. So we can now reload, and you can see that we're starting to build up what's going on here. So if we click any of these, then that won't go away at the minute because we haven't actually done our show hide. So that's probably what we need to do is if we go in here, okay, and this is, let's go to our attributes and make sure this is the analytics section. So this is the one we do want. So we're going to create a show hide formula. So what we do then is we can just simply say that the view, which is our URL, and then we can say equals, and then we can say analytics. Okay, and then if it's true, it will show. If not, it won't. So at the minute in our editor, it thinks it's false. By the way, a quick mention, because we're using URLs, if you're trying to do this in the editor, obviously the URL is not the same as when you run in the app. So this kind of won't work within the editor, but then again, you're generally better off testing it in the wild, which is in its own tab. So let's just reload that. It displays, and then it goes, and anything else. So the idea then is that you put all of the different sections in this kind of div whereby it shows and hides based on which option is selected in the URL. There is a bigger gap probably than what we need. So what we could do there, what have we set our sections to be? Let me have a look. Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure what's happened there, but let me close everything off. So probably what we need these to be actually is, rather than be 30%, we can probably make them like 32%, and then there's less of a gap. 32% and 32%. Okay, just for bolts and braces, just a little bit less of a gap. I don't know, maybe 31% might have done it, I don't know. But anyway, we can see what's happening there. So in the break, I just added this little section here just to make it look a little bit like this one. I've also added a little red one for when it's a downturn. Very straightforward, just a small SVG to the left and a text with a span to the right, so you can probably work that out exactly what's going on there from everything that we've covered. I just didn't want to waste time with it. So a big thanks for sticking with me so far. We've been going for over 3.5 hours. Let's try and bring this in under 4. So any tutorial or demo of Toddle would not be complete without calling an API, because obviously Toddle is a front-end builder, so to connect it to a database or to some other functionality in the cloud, you obviously need to access APIs. So what I've done, the quickest and easiest way to set up a back-end API with a database and all of those things is to use Xano, because it's free and it's very straightforward. So this is not a tutorial on Xano, so I'm not going to go through that. It's very, very straightforward. So what I've done, I've created a table called buyers, which is going to mimic this. I'm going to put this into action, okay? So we've got male, female, others. So I've just simply created a table with 3 fields, just put some data in there initially. So we're not going to do anything clever here. Just going to return one record from one table, and we're just going to get those results back in the Toddle and then deal with them in the UI. Okay, so that's the database table to call it. I've got an API that Toddle has actually auto-generated for me. I didn't even need to do this. So all we're doing is we're going to query all records from the buyers. It's a public endpoint, so there's no authentication required. It's a GET request, so we can deal with that. If we run and debug it in here, then we simply get our record in an object with our values in there. Very, very straightforward. So all we need to do this in Toddle is to click up here and go copy endpoint URL. And then back in Toddle, I'm now going to click off the canvas or press escape, and I'll get to our page settings. And then under APIs, I'm now going to set up a new API and call it buyers. It's a GET. So that's the same as what we've got in Xano, which is there. And I'm going to paste in our URL for our endpoint. And notice I've got auto fetch ticked here, so it should automatically go to Xano, get that data, bring it back, because there's no authentication required. It's a public endpoint. There we go. So we've got our data into Toddle now. It couldn't be simpler, to be honest with you. Just in case, just make sure that you do get this proxy ticked, because that means it's going to proxy through Toddle's infrastructure. If you don't have that ticked, it tries to make that request through the browser, and sometimes, not necessarily Xano, but some back-end servers will deny that because it's what we call a cause error, because it doesn't trust the origin of the call. So yeah, just make sure that's ticked. So we're ready to go with that, and we're going to leave it as auto fetched, which means that we don't have to manually make a call to it. As soon as the app loads, then the API gets called for us. Okay, so what I'm going to do there is to then say we need to create a duplicate of this. I'm going to close everything up because it can get a little bit confusing, as you can see. So that's our header. We don't need that. This is our main one. So this is our section. So we probably just need to paste it into there. There we go. Okay, close that up. And this is the one we're working with. So if you look in here, it's much higher. It's probably twice as high at least. So set the height to be, let's say 250, or actually let's say 300. Okay, so that's about right, roughly speaking, I think. So I'm just going to I'm just going to leave the titles in there for now. So I'm going to get rid of everything in each one that we don't need right now. So I'm going to get rid of that div. And I'm going to get rid of that div in there. So that's that one. So this one, sorry, we need this one. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of, let me see, no, I want that one. So I'm going to get rid, where are we? I'm going to get rid of that div, and I'm going to get rid of that div. And in here, I'm going to get rid of, not that one. Scroll down to that one and that one. So we've just got those in there for now. So what have we got? Traffic source. So let's just very quickly pop these in. Okay, traffic source. Okay, and the next one is customers. Okay, and then the last one is buyer's profile. Okay, so we've got buyer's profile, customers. So we're going to leave these alone. We don't really have any facility for graphs. However, what we do have is a component in that's available freely in Toddle, which I've developed quite some time ago, and it's freely available to go and grab if you like it, to give you like a little donut or a pie chart. So we're going to go and grab that. Now, at the minute, this is just how you grab public components. This will change because they're introducing a concept called packages. But right now, you can go to the component section of Discord. Make sure you are on Toddle's Discord and components. And if we drop down, pretty slow at the minute. Okay. I've got a thing called simple pie chart. So if you see this name anywhere on the Discord or whatever, that's me. Okay, so we've got a link. So all we need to do there is to copy this link. Okay, I've also put some instructions about how to use it, but let's just copy the link. So back in Toddle, now what I can do, if we go over here to the little icon and I click plus, then what I get is this option that says import from URL. So I'm going to select that. Okay, and I'm going to paste that URL in there. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to give it the name of, let's say, tutorial. And I'll just call it pie. Okay, and then we click create. And that's going to import it into our project. We don't need to worry about that. All of that means now is it's available to us. So if we go to our folder and we go back to our app. And so what I'm going to do then is I'm going to place that in there. So let's close everything up again to make it easy for ourselves. And okay, which ones are we after? We're after. Okay, close that one up. Close that one up. So it's inside this one, but it's not that one. This is why it's really good to name them by sticking the IDs as I went through before. Probably a few hours ago now. So, okay, so I'm in this div and we've got that there. So at the bottom of this div, I want to place that component. So I'm going to do E and I'm going to look for this section here, components. We've only got one and it's the one that we just imported. So I'm going to pop that in there. Okay, and let me make sure I've put it in the right place. Okay, so I'm just going to put it in, I probably put it in the wrong place there, yeah. So I'm just going to drag it to the top and then drag that one to the top so it's in the right place. I'm just going to put it in its own div. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to say wrapping element and it's going to be in a div. Okay, and I'm going to set this one to be 100% width and 100% height, okay? Actually, it shouldn't be 100%. We can fully flex it. So let's just flex it so it uses up the available space. That's the one that we want. Okay, so with our tutorial here, we need some data. If you look at the attributes, again, this is a custom component. So we have attributes and we have events. I don't want to get too deep into it. This is just purely to demonstrate what you can do. So with data, essentially it's asking you for the data that's going to be displayed in the pie chart. So if I have a look back in Discord at my documentation that I've actually recorded a video about how it works. That's something maybe you can do on your own time. There's also a Google Doc here. Okay, so what we need, we need the data attribute needs to be in this format here. So label, value, color. So what I want to do is to grab it from the URL, really. That's the whole point. I'm trying to demonstrate how you can use dynamic data in Toddle. So what we need in Toddle then, if we just have a look at this, is that we need that sort of format, but that's not the data that we're actually going to get back from Toddle's API. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go into formula. So we're going to need our own array, okay, for this, and it's going to have 3 objects in there. Do you remember we did the array of objects before? So I'm going to do this one, and again go back to our little chart component, label, value, color. So I'm going to do that. So it's going to be label, value, and color. So the label of the first one is going to be male, okay? And the color will leave as default because the chart gives it its own color, but the value is where I'm going to grab it dynamically from our API. So I'm going to grab that, and I'm going to say buyers. I'm going to point to data. Now that's going to return an array, but there's only one record, so we're just going to pick that one. And I'm going to say male, okay? And then that's going to grab that number that we had in our database. I'm going to leave the color as it is. I'm going to add 2 more to our in there. So I'm going to say female, and then I'm going to go here, I'm going to grab a female, and this one is going to be others. Okay, and I'm now going to grab the others value. Okay, so we're grabbing that information dynamically, and so we're getting that. So we're transforming the data that we get back. We're not transforming it, we're picking it out and then grabbing the bits that we need in there as well. Okay, so one thing I've missed is the color cannot be null. It has to be empty. So I'm basically just I've cleared all the null values out of the value field there, and so we get this. So it's going to look a little bit odd if we have it responsively stretching. So we need it to be like they've got it on the left hand side, filling up a specific width and height. So what I'm going to do with this on the div that's containing it, I am going to set that to be a width of, let's say, 100 by 100. Do it. Okay, I've got it set to flex at the moment, haven't I? That's no good. Okay, 100 by 100. Let's say 200 by 200. Okay, and so that looks more like it. If we run our app, then we should get reload on there as well. Quite nice. So that's looking good. So obviously we want a donut rather than a pie, such as this. So the way we do that is on our, we need to change the display to donut, which is great. If we look at our instructions here, it does say at the bottom, in the case it's displaying a donut chart, ensure that its container element has a background of inherit set by default, otherwise you won't see the hole in the donut. Okay, so let's make sure we're doing that. So in the container, let's go down to its background color. Nope, it's not set to inherit, it's set to clear, so let's inherit that. Okay, and then we see the hole in the donut. Okay, so let's take a look at that. Okay, reload. There we go. Okay, and one of the other things that you can do is to set the colors. So we've got like a green color, got a yellow color and a blue. So green, a yellow, blue. Let's just apply those because we can set those individually. So in our data that we're setting here, what we can do is, well, we need to set some hex code. So I will go away and grab that in a second. But the point is that at the minute, what's happening with the component is it's using its own default colors. So that's just to make sure that you have some colors, some kind of display. But if you want your own, we can supply it in this attribute here, or we can set our own color, a specific color on each individual object. So I'll go away and do that so that it looks more like the other thing. All right, so I've added some hex codes for each object, specifically, essentially just by using my little pipette and grabbing them out of their example. Okay, and so we now get the colors that we had in our other one, in our template. Okay, so we can now see that we get the correct colors. That's essentially how the component works. You can give it each data point, each data node, each object, its own specific color to display in the pie chart. Obviously, the main point is to show that this is dynamic data. So if I go into the database and I change these figures to, let's say 34, okay, and let's say 60 and 6. Okay, and we then reload that page. Okay, we're going to get a whole different pie chart. And if we go into here and look in here, where are we? So let's go to our API. Okay, switch off auto fetch, go grab it again. We can see that we get the new values in there as well. So the point is that everywhere else I've just put static text. Whereas with this one, I've made it work off dynamic data that I'm grabbing from an API, which is key to how you're going to develop applications in Toddle. We can sort of see that we're getting close to our layout and that we can do a million other things as well. There's also a legend there if you want to have a play. I won't do it here because I want to keep things moving. We're almost done, I promise. I have done also a chart legend that you can do with that as well, so you can grab that as well. Again, you just need to go in there and copy the link. There's a little bit of documentation that I put together for that one. So the point is you can also do your own custom components. Obviously, that's a subject not for today in this video, but you get the gist. So I think we will leave it there. To be honest, I think we've covered an awful lot about Toddle in this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for sticking with me. You're a real trooper for sticking it out this long. So I'm going to make some more videos soon. I also want to make some videos on responsiveness because this isn't particularly responsive. So I'd like to do that. So hopefully you've got a lot from this. Hopefully you've got the gist. Again, this has been a bit of a mammoth effort from me, and it's been a mammoth effort from you to watch it. So I hope that you've enjoyed it. I hope you've got a lot out of it. I could go on for another 2 hours fleshing everything out and getting everything perfect. I think we're better off stopping that there and then continuing in other videos. And to be honest with you, I've barely scratched the surface of what Toddle can do. One of the key things it can do, and I've sort of highlighted it with this, is components. And not just in terms of creating like graph components or whatever, so that you can compose your app from components, from little pieces put together. You can create a big app from components, and Toddle is amazing at doing that. That's a much more in-depth subject than what I wanted to cover here. But again, thank you so much for sticking with me. I really hope you got a lot out of it. I love Toddle. I want to spread the word. I want to make sure that everybody understands that it is the front-end builder in no-code at the minute. For me, it's the best that's out there. Again, thanks for watching. Thanks for sticking with me. And until next time, take it easy.